Oh, oh boy. What is this?
He said, I'd have to look up what he said, but honestly, who cares? Any bad things said towards Destiny, I promise you he deserves. Like, honestly, who cares? Um, wasn't that Central Committee? I believe that Central Committee said something about 100K or something, but honestly, like, who cares? Really, who cares? He said, I'd have to look up what he said, but honestly, who cares?
Let's bring Steven on. What's up, Steven?
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay.
What's
Hi.
going on? How you been?
Doing okay. Just working.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, I'm gonna go live on my end.
Oh, let me say hi to him, man. Let me say hi to him. What's up, Steven? How
Be a really, really good debate. We're going to talk about Israel versus Palestine, the topic that everyone fucking loves. And I'm excited about this one because you two are both some of the most studied and I would say knowledgeable people on this topic, but you come at it from different sides. So I think it's going to be fun. Let's just do a quick introduction for anyone who's not familiar with you. So Kareem, just Dr. Kareem, introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So, hi, everybody. I'm a physician by training, but for the past few years, I've been working in creating harmony and understanding between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Through that, I created a platform called the Levantines to bring anybody who's interested in creating a novel path to peace in the Levant. So, whoever's interested in a new page to the Middle East, go check that out on thelevantines.com. My grandfather was the father of the Syrian constitution, the Syrian president, past president in Syria, and he was very big on diplomacy and inclusion of minorities. I never met him, so I feel like this is a way for me to also carry the torch, and by learning from him and his stories, to really create this new path of inclusivity in the Middle East is something I'm super passionate about.
Cool. All right, Mr. Stephen Bunnell II.
Yeah, I do online debate. Wait, is your father Hafez? Is that what you said, or did I misunderstand?
No, his name is Hashim Atasi.
Oh, okay.
This is before the current Syrian regime.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
No. Very different ideologies.
Yeah.
Pro minorities, pro diplomacy. That's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, my name is Steven. Obviously, I do a lot of political conversations on different topics. Israel Palestine is probably one of the areas I'm a bit more studied in. We can go from there. I don't know. Sometimes I'm far left, sometimes I'm far right. It depends on who I'm debating or what their exact positions are. Just yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so the debate proposition is going to be: is Israel committing a genocide? Has Israel been committing a genocide? We're going to focus on that. My girlfriend's fucking around. The conversation can evolve from that, but let's start off with that debate proposition. Let's do a quick, 2 to 4 minute opening statement where you guys can just outline your positions on whether you think Israel's committing a genocide. I would like to, unless it's directly relevant, stay away from like shit that happened 100 or 200 years ago. Let's just focus on the current timeline. Obviously, you can reference things in the past if you feel like it's necessary to make your argument, but let's try to generally focus on now rather than the past. Okay, so I think that it would probably make the most sense for you, Kareem, to outline your position first, and then we'll go to Destiny. So, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to be Nazi on the time. Just take like somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes.
No problem. So, in terms of the question, is Israel committing genocide? I refer to the International Court of Justice's really conclusion, which is that Israel's committing plausible genocide. And the reason why that's important to understand is when you look at the Minister's Education statements today in the Knesset, when he goes like, I don't know how, but the Palestinians need to be exterminated, or the Minister of Heritage of the Knesset of Israel's government says we can't rule out using an atomic bomb in Gaza. The reason why members of the Knesset can say statements like that is because we have to understand that the origins of political Zionism, we were talking about history in the end of the 19th century. When I say Zionism today, I'm talking about Herzlian Zionism, I'm talking about Zionism in 1895. It's referred to by Theodore Herzl, Jabotinsky, the founder of revisionist Zionism, even Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, as a colonial project. And for a colonial project to happen, or a colonial adventure to happen, you de facto have to understand that in its essence, genocide has to be part of its execution. Because as Ben Gurion said, we must expel all the Arabs. As Herzl said, we must push the penniless population away from the border. So there was an understanding before any mass immigration of Jews came to Europe to to Palestine, or Ottoman Empire Palestine. There was already an understanding that there had to be the killing of innocent civilians to achieve that aim. So what I would say is that Israel is committing plausible genocide. Now, the reason why I'm saying the word plausible is because the way that Israel commits genocide is in pulses. So if you look at 1947, because some people counter-argue the idea of the population hasn't decreased, and if Israel is just committing genocide, why doesn't it flat out kill all Palestinians? The reason why is because it does it in pulses. So in 1947, 1.5 months before Israel declared independence, they did the Plan Delay. And if there's any rabbit hole, guys, that you want to go into, if there's anything you should take away with this from my side, is go look into Plan Delay. That's a must read. It's basically a plan, I'll finish with this, of how to take over basically what was at the time Mandate Palestine. And the Israelis displaced 700,000 Palestinians, burned 500 villages, and destroyed 50,000 homes. And this happened at a duration before even Israel declared independence. So that's genocide in itself. But then when you have that kind of, like I told you, this political Zionism that now seeps itself into Israeli society, it's rebranded in this kind of right-wing form currently with something called Kahanism. And Kahanism is based on Rabbi Kahane, who's a convicted U.S. terrorist. He's the ideological father of the political party of Ben Gvir. And so when you have basically people in politics in Israel that, if I told you like the United States has a minister of defense, minister of security that is convicted of supporting terrorism, that would be crazy. And so the reason why these people can say such genocidal statements, and the reason why the ICJ believes it's possible genocide, is because there is an intent to want to exterminate Palestinians, as the Minister of Education of Israel said, but they do it in a way where they have to be very cautious of the human rights organizations on the ground saying, okay, there's clear intent of killing any Palestinian they see. And so I would answer by saying that there's overwhelmingly plausible evidence that it's genocide. 2 days ago, the United Nations released a special report that said that Israel's policies are in line with genocide. Today, the Pope, actually, of the Vatican, said that there has to be an international kind of study on this issue. So I would say that it's plausible genocide. I don't believe every Israeli wants to kill every Palestinian, but I believe the people in power in Israel currently subscribe to a rebranded political version of militant Zionism known as Kahanism, and this kind of more right-wing extremist ideology of Zionism that wants to exterminate Palestinians to take all Judea and Samaria. That's what I would say.
All right, cool. Let's go to Stephen's opening statement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep this really simple. We can dive through all the history if we want. The idea that Zionism necessitated the expulsion, the mass expulsion of huge groups of people, or anything what happened that resembled what happened in the Plan Dalit in 47 and 48. I don't believe there's adequate justification for that. We can go back and forth quote sniping if we want, but I mean, the reality is most of the negative quotes that Jewish people or Jewish leaders had about Palestinians came in the 30s, the late 30s, or after, when a lot of violence had already happened from the Arab to Jewish side, because obviously the Arabs didn't want the Jews that were coming in for a variety of reasons. But I think that at multiple points in history, Jews have shown that they are willing to compromise with the state, with the Palestinians or the surrounding Arabs. And I think at multiple points in history, the Arabs have shown that they were never willing to compromise, although that has changed kind of recently because obviously after 73, Israel kind of showed that we're going to be here forever, no matter what you like, and you need to make peace with us and figure it out. The ICJ never said that a genocide is plausibly being committed. That's a common misreading of what the ICJ said. There's a lot of boring and weird and dumb legalese to get into, like what exactly the rights of on the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide Convention, all of that entails. But the last ICJ president, who was president when South Africa brought that case before the ICJ, Joan Donahue, she said explicitly, and she clarified explicitly, that when they said it was plausible that the rights were being violated, what they were saying is there was plausibility that the Palestinians had a right to be protected from the crime of genocide by Israel, and they explicitly did not say that it was plausible that a genocide was occurring. These are still things that are within the determination of the court, and it'll depend on how the case proceeds and what South Africa presents and what Israel presents in contradiction to that. Insofar as like whether a genocide is happening or not, like the only thing that I guess I ask people to consider, although it doesn't matter at this point because especially with this conflict, like people have their narratives that are so widely divergent from each other historically and factually. When you're talking about a genocide, what you're really talking about is a group of people that with the intention in mind to absolutely eradicate or destroy another group of people. And we have to be able to differentiate this from just ordinary warfare. And the idea that there's an exploding population, yeah, that in and of itself doesn't rule against genocide. The idea that one side is providing, food and water to the other, even if they restrict it, it just seems to like it's maybe not a genocide. The idea that people will say 80% of the Gaza Strip has been destroyed, but the casualties and the deaths are obviously nowhere near 80% of the people shows that, okay, I guess they're not blowing up all the people. The idea that the other side can surrender and stop being warred against doesn't seem to be like, there's just nothing about this is consistent with a genocide, other than a few irresponsible statements that people have made for sure. But I don't think that the evidence is there. I don't think the evidence for it is strong. And I think it takes away from the more important conversation of how do we feel about the justifications for the war right now, and what can we do to bring the conflict to an end?
Okay, cool. So before we go to open dialogue, I'm just going to outline. So I might step in a lot or might not step in at all. With these conversations, I find sometimes people start talking past each other. And if that tends to be the case, I will step in and try to get people to be on the same page. If someone is purposely avoiding answering a question, I will step in and make them answer that question. If someone's not able to talk because they're repeatedly being cut off, I probably will step in. Other than that, I probably will not say a word, unless those things happen. Like I said, I do want to generally try to keep it based on, what's happening right now. But obviously I understand that history is a part of it, but generally let's try to keep that in mind and keep it more on, on what's going on right now, what's been going on since the war started about a year ago. Okay, you guys can go to open dialogue. Whoever wants to ask the first question, feel free.
In terms of asking a question, I just want to say that in response to a few statements that you said, I think a good one to expand on is the idea that Israel has been ready to compromise land for the exchange of peace. I think this is a very deceitful argument. I'm not saying you're being deceitful. I think it's an argument that people don't really realize the kind of context behind the line. Let's take, for example, when Israel gave Sinai back to Egypt. I think this is a very common example where people say, oh, Israel has been willing to give Sinai back to Egypt for the mediation of peace. However, there are much more deeper reasons for why Israel would give Sinai back to Egypt in that particular case. And that was because Sinai at the time, there were only 18 settlements in Sinai. The funding of 18 settlements in Sinai was getting too expensive to Israel. Israel was coming out of the Yom Kippur War, neutralizing the biggest military threat for Israel, which was Egypt at the time. The strongest military force in the Middle East, which was Egypt at the time, was a far better advantage for Israel. It also came with the context of allowing Israeli ships to pass through the Suez Canal, which is a far better advantage for Israel in terms of trade than just keeping 18 settlements in Sinai. And thirdly, it came with a lot of financial aid that was much needed at the time because Israel was spending a lot of billions of dollars on war, and Egypt as well. And so this is something that basically was not really, I would say, for the mediation of peace, because Israelis continued to annex the West Bank after 1967. This happened in 1978 when Israel gave Sinai back to Egypt. But they wanted peace. They wanted to have continued to violate international law. But they gave back Sinai to Egypt because it came with Suez Canal access. It came with Egypt recognizing Israel's international waters, and it came with neutralizing the biggest military threat for Israel. So my question, I guess, if I had to ask a question, is if Israel wanted peace, why would it, for example, violate, let's say, if there was an Arab peace initiative in 2002, he said the Israelis are always the ones that are willing to do peace. 2002, King Saudi Arabia passed an agreement that would allow all the Arab countries of the Middle East to make peace with Israel, in exchange that Israel would simply take away the settlements from the West Bank and Gaza, which is basically telling Israel, just abide by international law. And Israel refused. So I don't think that this idea that Israel is always the one that does peace treaties and is willing to exchange land is really true. But I wanted you to tell me what your response would be to that.
So I think the arguments about the Sinai are kind of unconvincing. First of all, the idea that if they give something up, they're getting something for it, and therefore that's why they do it. That doesn't take away the fact that somebody wants to make peace. Like Israel could give away the entire West Bank back to Jordan or make it a Palestinian state and get a whole bunch for it. That would still make it peace. The idea that travel through the Sinai or travel through the Suez Canal was like guaranteed if they gave the Sinai back to Egypt. One, that wouldn't even be guaranteed. And two, they already could travel through it because they controlled all of the Sinai, and they wouldn't be able to bully Egyptian ships or bully Egyptian land until they allowed them to travel through. Three, after the 1967 war, Israeli ships were already able to pass through the Sinai. That was the whole point of the United Nations emergency forces, the EU NEF peacekeeping forces that were spread throughout the Sinai. So they already had access to travel through the Suez Canal. And then the idea that settlements were costing too much in the Sinai for Israel, I also don't find convincing. I mean, Israel was willing to fund settlements anywhere. They were raising a decent amount of money internationally from the Jewry, and it seemed like they were doing a good job at taking Jews from around the world, putting them in Israel or around Israel, and turning those into profitable things. So I don't think that settlements would have been completely and totally untenable or unfeasible in the Sinai. In terms of like talking about how the Palestinians have been willing to accept peace, and then you proffer the Arab Peace Initiative as an example of this. The Arab Peace Initiative in 2002 doesn't say anything about giving up the right of return, which is like this huge thing that's hanging over all of Israel and Palestine for what a final peace agreement looks like. And as long as you're going to say every single Palestinian refugee has an infinite and unlimited and unrestricted right of return to Israel proper, when there are over 6 or 7 million people outside of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip that are considered Palestinian refugees, obviously that's never going to be accepted. That's not a real agreement. That would lead to probably the dissolution of the Israeli state.
Mm-hmm. So why would you say that people who, let's say, are who are Jews who never lived in the lands of Israel or Palestine, that are living across the world, have the right to come and displace a Palestinian who's living in the West Bank, whose family has lived there for 1,000 years? What's the justification for that? Especially that it violates international law, especially that it violates humanitarian law. And just personally, if you're living in Florida and your family's been living there for 1,000 years, and Russia comes and colonizes Florida, and then for some weird reason allows the mass migration of Mexicans to Florida, can a random Mexican who's in the diaspora come and displace your home in Florida, even though you've been living there for thousands of years? What's the justification for that? Even though it's illegal, like, I want to be just very objective, because a lot of the things that I mentioned to you weren't my opinion. They were what IPAC was talking about, why Israel gave back the Sinai to Egypt. But just objectively speaking, is we have to have a standard that we all approve on. And here we're going to try our best to say that that's international law, because that's the best we can come up with. If that violates international law, what justification would someone from Brooklyn come to Israel and displace a Palestinian who's been living there for thousands of years? What justification is that for the right of return or the aliyah of all Jews all around the world to come displace Palestinians who've been living there for thousands of years?
So, I mean, appealing to international law doesn't really work here, because nothing in this region has been solved by international law. It's been solved by bilateral or multilateral agreements between the countries that are involved with each other. Every country in this region has been violating international law for hundreds of years. I don't know, like, the appeal to international law, I don't think is a very strong one here for Israel. In terms of what right do people have to come back into Israel and settle whatever territory in Israel or the West Bank, I mean, those are the rights doled out right now by the Israeli government. Personally, I think they're a little bit self-destructive. I'm not a big fan of settlements in the West Bank, but I don't think that's totally relevant to the question of whether or not they're currently committing as genocide. But I think the West Bank settlements and the expansion of the settlements in the West Bank are really bad for a variety of reasons.
No, I'm glad you agree with that. I think that one of the things that's weird about this is, you were talking about how those countries in the Middle East, not a lot of them have been abiding by international law. But the problem with that is Israel brands itself as this Western democracy in the Middle East. But the thing is, it's also the only Western democracy in the world that has a convicted terrorist as its Minister of Defense. It's also the only Western democracy in the world that has a prime minister who has an outgoing arrest warrant, or an outgoing application for an arrest warrant for him by the ICJ.
Wait, who's a convicted? I might have missed it.
No. It's an application for it. That's why I tried to specify. It's an application for his arrest.
I think he's asking about who's the convicted terrorist.
Netanyahu. The prime minister.
No, I thought you were talking about Ben Gvir.
Ben Gvir is the one who's convicted of supporting terrorism.
That's.
Is that what you're asking? Yeah, that's him. 2007.
I think that was the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? I could be wrong. Isn't Ben Gvir is he the Interior Minister? He's not the Defense Minister. Right?
Minister of Defense, Minister of Security.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Minister of Security. He is also a member, just for the sake of conversation, of a party called Azmat Yahudit. Azmat Yahudit is the ideological child of the CAC. The CAC is regarded as a U.S. terror group. It is a political party that is framed after, actually to be more accurate, by Rabbi Kahane. Rabbi Kahane is a convicted terrorist, according to the United States. He's the one who openly incited or inspired a Jewish terrorist who went and opened fire on 700 Palestinian worshippers. So this is the kind of reality of Israel, Stephen. It's kind of like you have this so-called Western government that stands tall, but then at the same time pisses on the rest of the international community. It literally urinates on it. Because at the same time that it holds itself as the Western democracy in the Middle East, it is basically not being held accountable to the international law that all the other Western countries are, let's say, presumably, or at least outwardly pretending or at least adhering to. And so the idea of the fact that it doesn't matter, I disagree with, because we have to have some sort of standard that we're referred to. I mean, I'm not gonna, if you're gonna come compare, let's say, Israel with a country that's been in war for the past 10 years or the past kind of 15, or had a 10-year long period of war, let's say Iraq or the invasion of Iraq from the United States, it's gonna be a very different picture. Because here in one side, you have a country that's been funded by the United States continuously, that's been backed by the United States, that holds itself as a Western democracy. So I'm gonna hold it in the same framework that I would hold any Western country.
So does that mean, do you have a lesser standard then for the Palestinians and the surrounding Arabs?
It's not that I would have a lesser standard personally. I try to hold everybody accountable.
Then why does it matter then if we're saying Israel is a West? So then that whole talking point is defunct, right? Why would we say this?
It matters. It matters because they brand themselves as the only Western democracy in the Middle East. So what the undertone of that is, we are at a different.
Sure, but I'm ignoring what Israel brands themselves. I'm asking you: do you hold Israel to a higher standard than the surrounding Arabs or the Palestinians?
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. You're asking two different questions with that, right?
No, that's the only question I was asking.
When you're asking me personally, do I hold them to different standards? Me personally, I would condemn anybody who's violating international law. But when you're asking kind of from why is this point important, right? Is because on this side, you have a country that's recognized, that's funded by the United States, that shrines itself as a Western democracy, having a convicted supporter of terrorism as its Minister of Security. Do I think if, let's say, for example, Iran has a convicted supporter of terrorism as their Minister of Security, is that wrong? Absolutely. I totally condemn that, right? But here I'm holding Israel accountable, right? I would hold Iran accountable in a different conversation or maybe in a different context. But right now, I'm holding Israel accountable for the fact that they have a convicted supporter of terrorism in their as their Minister of Security. They have a Prime Minister.
I don't like Ben-Gvir. I don't like Smoltrich. I don't like these people either. I think that they're abhorrent people. I think they're gross people for sure. I don't like the current some of the people that are part of the government of this current coalition with Netanyahu. I agree with that. Yeah. But none of that gets us any closer to have Palestinians or the surrounding Arabs ever been willing to accept a peace initiative that has a fair solution to things, or is it always just there needs to be an infinite right of return, and none of this gets us any closer to saying Israel's committing a genocide against the Palestinians because of the response to October 7th?
Well, I think we agree on a lot of things, so let's have an open conversation about that. So what do you think is the hurdle? What's the question? What do you feel like needs to be very outlined?
I guess so here's the question. So I wholly condemn the West Bank settlements. I think that they're abhorrent. I think that they move us further and further from any kind of peace arrangement. I think that there are elements to the Netanyahu government that are especially exemplified in people like Smoltrich and people like Ben-Gvir that are just abhorrent and disgusting. I think they've made disgusting statements that are on balance indefensible. Do you feel that same way about Hezbollah or Hamas?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say that I definitely condemn Hezbollah and Hamas because, number one, as a Muslim, as someone who believes in the Islamic faith, these organizations are a clear violation of scripture. The same way that I would say the KKK is a clear violation of the Bible, right? But people will always use verses as a way to extremely push their radical moves, even in Israel, right? The people that you refer to as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir quote verses of the Bible wrongfully to pass them. So yes, your answer, definitely I condemn Hezbollah and Hamas. But I would say Hezbollah and Hamas are a symptom of several layers of Western intervention in the region. Remember that Islamic terrorism, to begin with, didn't even exist before World War I. And the reason why this is so important to explain is because in World War I, in 1917, you have the Sykes-Picot Agreement, another very big rabbit hole to go into. So at that time, basically the British, Sir McMahon, was communicating with a guy in modern-day Saudi Arabia, an area called the Hijaz, who was called Sharif Mecca. He promised him and his sons an independent Arab kingdom that would go all the way from the southern borders of Turkey all the way to Oman and Yemen. So you're talking about all Oman and Yemen, talking about all this area to be an independent Arab kingdom. At the same time, the French and British, behind the Arabs' back, were basically debating which countries to slice between them as colonies. So they were lying to the Arabs that if they revolted against the Ottomans, they would give them an independent Arab kingdom, while at the same time discussing between themselves which colonies to take. And as Lawrence of Arabia put it in his book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, they've said that this was a spy, a British spy in the Middle East. He said, we successfully divided the Islamic bloc such that it can never reunite. So the first thing to understand is that Islamic terrorism, or this kind of movements of Islamic terrorism, Islamic terror groups, came as a response to the fact that Western intervention through multi-layers, right? Whether it's in U.S. invasion of Iraq, et cetera, or through multiple layers, even Al-Qaeda, right? Al-Qaeda is a U.S. funded group that was established to fight the USSR in the Cold War, right? So all these Islamic groups that were created in response to Western intervention in the region and the reparations not having been executed and no rights have been given and no justice has been served. And so, for example, take Hamas. Hamas was elected in 2006, right? Israel was made independent in 1948. So you're talking about almost 60 years of illegal occupation, of displacement of Palestinians, of annexing of land, right? Of the killing of innocent civilians in multiple instances, right? Killing of journalists, right? Using a white phosphorus. I can go on and on. Illegal detainees with no sentencing. Those 60 years of that, if the international community then passes a law and says, you know what, Palestinians, you're right, annexing land from the West Bank is wrong, and still nobody's heeding to the call of the Palestinians, what would you do if you were living in Palestine and you're a Palestinian and someone's taking your home, you're getting displaced, now you're in the West Bank, someone's taking now your land, the international community agrees with you, it's illegal, but Israel continues to annex it, or if you're living in Gaza, for example. And so I would say that Hamas and Hezbollah 100% condemn them, but I'm not naive to not realize, and not to say that you're naive, I'm just saying, speaking in generality, that they're a byproduct of Western intervention in the region and the lack of respect of Israel in this specific case to abide by international law and to ensure reparations and justice and the acknowledgement of plan, delay, and their past.
Okay. In that case, then I would further qualify then my condemnation of the Israeli government. I would say the condemnation that I have of the Israeli government, while I understand that their militarism is not good and their imperial, we'll call it imperial adventurism, furthering entrenching their West Bank settlements is not good. I understand it, and I know where it comes from. The idea that the Jews had been basically betrayed by Europe when they were Holocausted, that they'd been betrayed by the British when they were promised, a land that was safe for them to live in the Levant, and then when they felt themselves betrayed later on by the Palestinians and the Arabs when they were attacked and massacred in places like Hebron and across every single Arab majority country in the Middle East when they defended themselves in 47 and 48. And then when they further defended themselves in 67, and then when they defended themselves in 73, I understand why Israelis don't trust surrounding Arab states and where their militarism comes from. Probably because it seemed to be the explicit goal of all of the surrounding Arabs that the Israelis, the Jews, needed to be excised from the continent. There was no acceptable Jewish state that could have ever existed there. They felt like they were entitled to that land after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. You bring up the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You called them colonies. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that. The Sykes-Picot Agreement definitely split spheres of influence, but it wasn't necessarily make colonies. They gave mandates to all of these areas so that they would individually administer and govern themselves and then become their own countries, which they did. I also don't know, you referred to those, the McMahon correspondence back and forth. I don't know if I would say that none of that actually hardcore delineated this will be the new Arab state. I know some interpret it as though maybe promises were made, maybe not, but those correspondences didn't actually lay out like a solid, like this is the country you're going to have afterwards. But I could understand Arabs feeling a little bit betrayed by that, although there were mandates after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire and those countries were created. But yeah, I mean, like there's been a history of, and you keep saying the United States funds Israel, the United States has funded this or whatever. That is true 73 and onwards. Prior to 73, the Soviet Union was funding a lot of the Arab states when they were funding against Israel that basically had no funding and no support from probably about 1939 onwards or 1940 onwards. So, I mean, like, I understand where the Israeli militarism comes from. They're surrounded by a bunch of people that want to see them destroyed, and the international community seems to be largely silent on the issue, that while they condemn Israel over and over again, I mean, Iran was basically allowed access to their funds again and restrictions on them, less under Obama for a while. Nobody really seems to want to do anything about Hezbollah except for Israel. Nobody seems to do anything about Hamas except for Israel. Nobody seems to do anything about the Houthis, really, except, I mean, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. were for a while, but just Israel fighting them. So, yeah, I mean, I understand where the Israeli militarism comes from.
Yeah, so a couple of things. When you're talking about how these were in colonies, I disagree with you on that because, Sykes and Picot, both of them generals, have explicitly called them as colonies. And you have to understand the mandate. When you talk about a mandate, like a British mandate or French mandate of Syria, that's another word for colony, really. You have militant groups on the ground. You have French boots on the ground. France definitely colonized Syria, right? That's recorded in history. There's a French mandate of Syria. A mandate is literally, in other words, a colony. You can call it as kind of like an interim of creating a new state later, but the fact that the French and the British didn't colonize the Middle East is factually incorrect. I understand where you're coming from, but it's still the forces of Western intervention that calls the shots still existed. And the fact that the British did promise an independent Arab kingdom to Sharif Mecca, or at the time, which is called later as King Hussein. By the way, the King of Jordan today is one of the ancestors of that family, the Hashemite family. You have to understand that basically in multiple communications back and forth, they've promised those lands, and then there was an evolution of that, which is why eventually you have Jordan being recognized as under, that Hashemite family. There was a point in time where the West has ceded into the degree by which those promises they made. So, for example, like at the beginning, they promised an independent Arab kingdom. Later, they said, "Oh, the west of the west to the cities such as Damascus, Homs, etc., which is basically modern-day Lebanon, Palestine, cannot be said to be truly Arab." So they weren't going to include it in the independent Arab kingdom. Later, that evolved, right? So a lot of betrayal and promises happen, and I think you recognize the betrayal aspect of that and why Arabs would feel that way. You also said something about why Israel would be militant because of the fact that Jews have been betrayed in Europe and betrayed in the Middle East. First of all, you said it perfectly. There were Jews in the Middle East, and you said they left the Middle East. They left Middle Eastern countries, as you said, in the period between, let's say, 1930 to 2005, right? So the Jews have been living there before, right? So what happened in that duration that has pushed the exodus of Jews to Israel? Of course, there was a lot of anti-Semitism that rose in that area, which I completely condemn. I completely condemn any violence that happened to the Jews in the Middle East personally. And so, yes, I condemn that, but to explain that in a vacuum, it would be incorrect because it removes the context of what was happening in the region, such as a Western colony, such as a Western-backed ideological colony. Theodor Herzl in Basel, Switzerland, talks about, Zionism. Ben Gurion was the leader of the Jewish agency in Palestine. So this is a Western-minded colony, as even Theodor Herzl talks about it, that's coming to the Middle East. So the Arabs are looking at this as a foreign intervention in their land. So put yourself in their shoes, right? You're living in Florida. Russia colonizes your land, okay? And then starts massively immigrating Mexicans just to
hold on, wait. So what year are we talking about?
What are we talking? We're talking about the creation of the state of Israel. We're talking about the mass immigration of just. We're talking about post-Holocaust. We're talking 1940s.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is after. It's not just Russia randomly sending Jews randomly sending Russians to America. It's after America has lost a massive war against Russia and then dissolved as a country, right?
No, because it's not that. Now I'm confused with the analogy because
you're trying to make an analogy of Russia just taking parts of the United States and then sending Russians there, but it wasn't that. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. They dissolved as a country, so that state no longer existed, right?
But why did the Ottoman Empire collapse? It collapsed after World War I. It collapsed as a result of the British.
Yeah, after World War I, yeah.
Yes. And why did it collapse? It collapsed out of the British support to the Arabs to revolt against the Ottomans.
That was it. The Ottomans still fought in World War I. The support from any Arab leadership was pretty minor. That wasn't like a determining factor in how World War I and the Ottoman Empire were losing.
No, it does. It does. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is in 1917. Okay, so the Sykes-Picot Agreement that we were talking about, before that even, right, the correspondence to the individual that I was telling you who was living in Hijaz, was Sharif Mecca, was regarded as a governor of Mecca at the time. The correspondence, the deal is, if you revolt against the Ottomans, we will support you and your sons to have an independent Arab kingdom. That was the deal, right?
Yeah, but the Arab revolt in the Ottoman Empire during World War I was not like a huge event. Was it just a few thousand people? I don't think that many people were involved. And also, when you talk about like guarantees for Arab states,
the numerical value of it, it's about the fact that, first of all, the Arabs have bombed the Hijazi Railway, which is the track railway that goes from Istanbul to.
Also, real quick, in about 3-4 minutes, I'm going to bring it back to the original topic. So
no problem.
I'm just saying the Arabs still largely supported the Ottomans, right? The Arabs still largely supported.
That's true. That's true that the Arabs largely supported the Ottomans, but that doesn't really matter because the Arabs that didn't, or the Arabs that were violently breaking the infrastructure of the Ottomans, are the ones who helped the British eventually be present in Palestine and make way to Palestine. right?
I don't know if that's necessarily true, but also I mean, like they didn't have anywhere near, because I think the British fantasy from that correspondence was that there would be a huge Arab revolt, and there wasn't. It was pretty minor. And in terms of promises for an Arab state afterwards, there were a ton of Arab states created afterwards. You said earlier that the mandates were the same as colonies, but they weren't. The mandates were explicitly created with the intention of transferring those territories over to people. It wasn't like Algeria, where the French tried to remain in control until they were forcefully expelled. Like, people didn't have to forcefully expel the French and the British from the surrounding created Arab states. They were all created and given states, essentially, right?
So that's not completely true. So the first thing you need to understand is those countries that were split in a way in terms of their borders specifically designed so that they would be in continuous conflict. It's not like the British and the French said, okay, we're just going to give the Arabs independent sovereignty and we're going to leave. That's not what happened, right? If you look at Lawrence of Arabia, who was the spy who was sent to the Middle East to be basically the person who was kind of befriending the Arabs and acting as the British liaison to the Arabs. In his book, he talks clearly about the fact how the British betrayal to the Arabs has led to them selling their land, has led to them basically betraying their cause and dividing the Islamic bloc completely, and how the borders of the Arab countries, especially Syria, Lebanon, etc., because of the ethnical demographic portrayal of that, they divided the countries in a way where the distribution of ethnicities and minorities and majority would be in such a way where those countries would be internally in conflict. That's why the Middle East is continuously in chaos today, amongst many other factors. But the framework of that was done by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The borders of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, etc., are designed specifically so those countries are completely in.
Why didn't the borders of any of those countries change in any of the ensuing wars for the next 100 years then?
Because how would they change? How would that happen?
They would conquer territory from the person next to them.
So, well, you have to understand that ever since that happened, right, there was a series of governments that took place, but there's always been destabilization. Right?
In some states, some states have been more destabilized than others, for sure.
I mean, Iraq was destabilized, Syria was unstable, Lebanon was unstable, right? The only ones that weren't were the Gulf countries, and I can go into why later. That's a whole completely different conversation.
I mean, there was a variety of. It depends on what you consider stable, but for instance, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan. Were more stable than say, Syria was incredibly unstable in its beginning.
But why was Jordan stable? There's a reason for that.
Sure. If you're going to bring up the fact that the Hashemite monarchy derived a lot of its value from, some people would argue, probably installed by the British or validity from the British. Yeah, but I mean, but again, there were tons of wars that were fought. It's not like there were borders changing all the time because these borders were cut so arbitrarily, and it's not like the ability to change borders wasn't possible because World War II happened, obviously, and people changed borders during World War II. So the idea that the British and the French carved this up explicitly just to cause conflict just doesn't seem reasonable.
That's their own words, right? If you look into,
is it their own words, or is it what one guy, the Lawrence of Arabia guy, said?
But the Lawrence of Arabia is a representative. He's literally a British spy in the region, right? He's a member of the British Legion Army at the time, right? So take him at his words. But going back to why I'm opening all this topic, right, is I think we were talking about how does this relate to Israel? Again, remind me, we're talking about how this relates to Israel.
Yeah, I'll bring it back.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pose this question. That's a different way of approaching the same exact discussion.
Yeah.
So, which of these three options do you think is the case? Number one, Israel is purposely targeting civilians, or at least sometimes purposely targeting civilians. Number two, Israel is just indiscriminately shooting and bombing civilians. They're not purposely trying to target civilians, but they just don't care if they kill them. Or three, Israel is generally trying to follow the rules of law, and the people, most of the time, the civilians who die are just casualties, right? But Israel's doing their best to limit civilian death. Which one of these three do you guys think is the option? Is the most likely scenario?
It's a weird question because there were instances, right, where it is clear that Israel has killed civilians deliberately, right? You have the example of Hind Rajab, 10-year-old kid. There's a lot of kind of investigations that happen on this case where basically she was shot. A lot of analysis says 300 bullets. It's kind of debated in different sources, but the idea is that there was a young child, 10 years old, who Israeli army was able to see in the car. I mean, the World Kitchen, I can talk about that later, but they kept shooting this car where this 10-year-old was in, ended up the family dying. Hind Rajab survived, calls for help. The paramedics come in. The Israeli army shoots the paramedics and end up eventually killing the 10-year-old child, right? And so I'll talk about even the World Kitchen because that's even something that's much more recent. The World Center Kitchen, I believe, was a human was a human aid organization to support people in Gaza on the ground. Many of them were foreigners. They had this truck with the logo of WCK at the top they communicated, I have it in this source actually, with the Israeli army. They told them the routes that they're going to take, and they also told them to identify them based on the logo that they have on top of their van. Despite all of that, and despite the Israeli army knowing, that they're working on the ground, the route, they approved the routes of that, they still bombed them with 3 separate missile attacks, right? It's not like it was one missile that exploded all 3 cars. It was 3 drone attacks, right? And then you also talk about the the doctors that are testifying recently for finding bullets in baby brains, right? In like children that are below 2 or 3 years old with bullets in their heads. When you're a sniper in the army, you're not sitting there and shooting everyone like if you're shooting, I don't know, like a semi-automatic rifle or an AK-47. You're literally aiming deliberately at the person, right? I would say, to answer your question, it's not like all of Israel wants to deliberately kill every single Palestinian. That's what makes these conversations always nuanced. I would say that either there are members in the IDF that are driven by this extremist ideology that they just hate Palestinians and they have this kind of supremacist view of themselves, or it's that there's an ideology at certain moments where there's certain operations where kind of this ethical framework gets overcome or gets penetrated, and then they end up actually killing innocent civilians. So I would say it's closer to 1 or 2, in my opinion.
Okay.
But I don't think Israel is always killing.
Yeah, we're talking about currently, and we're talking about the IDF. We're not talking about like just the average Israeli citizen.
Okay.
We're talking about the IDF. We're talking about the leadership in Israel. We're not talking about the average Israeli.
Yeah, I would stand with what I said, that there's a lot of clear cases where the IDF has killed civilians deliberately, not as a cause of collateral damage.
Okay. Let's let Destiny.
Go ahead, Destiny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of evidence of bad actors individually that have done things, but the idea that there's some like top-down coordination or top-down plan to kill people, I just think that the situation on the ground just wholly betrays that. I think we would expect to see far more people killed, given the amount of damage and weapons that have been deployed. I think we would expect to see far more evidence of there being these commands issued. I think we'd expect to see far more like situations that are horrible, no other explanation. The idea that like Israel is engaged in like this just the most subliminal genocide in all of human history, where they're trying to commit as much of a genocide as they can without anybody in the international community noticing, and as much of a genocide as they can, I guess, for the ICJ to still have the South African people bring a case against them for genocide, but nobody else can see it, and it's not really killing enough people to get rid of all of them, but it's enough to make everybody hate it. It's a super wholly unconvincing. Like if I just say instead, Israel feels like it needs to defend itself against Hamas, and in doing so, they persecute a pretty aggressive ground war in one of the most densely civilian populated areas of all time, and they're just pretty shitty towards Palestinians in general. So they're an occupied people. They view them as kind of an enemy. Like that explains literally every single thing from top to bottom, without very many difficult to explain things. People die in war. Accidents happen in war. Things fuck up. It's not good. It's not pretty, but it's happened in literally every single war ever. We just have an unprecedented amount of access to this one.
Real quick, I want to flesh out Destiny's position. Are you saying it's more of number 2 or more of number 3?
What was 2 and 3 again?
2 is just negligence. Like Israel's not purposely trying to kill civilians, but they just don't care if they kill civilians. They're not trying to actually go out of their way to protect the civilians. Number 3 is actually going out of their way or doing what, for example, the American.
It's obviously like heavily in the direction of number 3, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you were saying about that if you were to say the narrative that Israel is protecting itself against Hamas, everything would slot in. But the problem with that is that Israel is committing those atrocities and violations of international law before Hamas was created. So you have to go back to the root cause, right? These issues have existed before Hamas has ever existed. So to frame them as a cause of Israel defending itself against Hamas completely removes the 40 years or so, let's say 2006 till 1948, or 60 years of that existing before Hamas existed, right? So what do you make of?
Why did we go back to 48 again?
Let's go back to 19. I'm just giving you a period of time before Hamas existed where Israel was still committing those atrocities. Because I think.
Wait, what do you mean? This war has led to probably more Arab deaths that Israel has caused than probably the combination of every single war in the past compared to the current war.
So first thing you need to understand. So Israel's focus is to annex land. If Palestinians come in the way with that, they'll eliminate them. If they don't have to kill them, they won't.
Then why did they withdraw in 2005 from Gaza?
First of all, Israel's disengagement in 2005 isn't part of like a peace engagement.
I didn't say it was a part of a peace engagement, but it was part of losing. It was part of withdrawing settlements from a land where they could have pushed Palestinians out, but they didn't. They pulled Israelis out. Right?
They shifted resources to the West Bank and continued annexing the West Bank. So it's not like they didn't want to, displace Palestinians. Okay, but Israel disengaged in 2005 by a unilateral move by I think it was Ariel Sharon, who removed settlements in Gaza in 2005 for several reasons. Number one, the 8,000 settlers that were in Gaza at the time were under a blanket of 1.2 million Palestinians. And they were getting a lot of attacks also from Hamas at the time, which is why when Hamas deterred them, in the next year when they were elected, a lot of Palestinians in Gaza looked at Hamas as well. They're actually able to deter Israelis from Gaza. So, but the reason why Sharon disengaged from Gaza is also to shift resources towards the West Bank, so according to their own resources. The second reason why he did it is also, as in his own senior advisor, I think his name is Wiseman, he literally said that this is a way to halt the peace process, because by removing settlements in Gaza, they're getting a little bit of bonus points in terms of the eye of the international community. And so the reason why they disengaged from Gaza was, number one, because the settlements were getting too difficult to protect. Okay, it was getting too expensive to continue to foster,
So I don't think it was. Sharon also wanted to disengage from the West Bank as well. He just didn't have the political support for it. Some of the settlements he did pull the plug on some of them. I think it was 9 or 10 of them in the West Bank. But obviously, people were already incredibly upset that he was pulling the plug on the Gaza settlements. There's video footage of people crying and screaming as the IDF is pulling them out of their homes, and the Jewish people always got super ass pain about that. And I mean, as you said earlier, like settlements were pulled out of the Sinai in '73 when or after '73 when Israel signed peace with Egypt in '79. That was some 5,000 settlers that were pulled out of the Sinai. So I agree that they want to continue to expand into the West Bank. I don't think Sharon wanted to continue to expand to the West Bank. I think Sharon wanted to pull settlements out of everywhere, but he didn't have the support to do it. But the appeal to international law is just not. It's just not very strong when nobody in this region has followed international law since the inception of Israel and prior to that. It's hard to appeal to it now just because they lost all of their wars of extinction in the past, and now they find themselves needing to appeal to international law for protection.
Destiny, can you also address what Kareem said? Address the world central kitchen bombing, and address that little girl story he mentioned.
Yeah, both are horrible. I mean, these are horrible actions. They suck. But the idea that Israel's today we're just going to do the worst PR event for us ever in the history of all of our country, and we're going to just fucking kill these people feeding the Palestinians because we just want to be super, fuck up. Obviously they're whether it's because they were moving too quickly, whether it's because there is some unacceptable amount of negligence or recklessness is happening, obviously something horrible is happening here, and there should be people that should be held to account for it. But I just find it wholly unconvincing that after months and months of conducting a war, it was okay, today we're going to kill 3 of the charity workers, foreign wise, because that's just going to be great for us. It was a terrible, horrible event for Israeli PR, and everybody knew that, right?
So do you think it was negligence, or you think it was just a pure accident?
I think something like that seems to rise to the level of negligence. As was, I can't pronounce his name, Kareem. As was said earlier, the routes that those trucks were traveling on were shared ahead of time with the Israeli military. So those routes should have been cleared ahead of time. The trucks were marked, and although they were hit at night, I believe ISR in the area would have even been able to see the markings. So it was at the least it was negligence. It seems to be the case. Yeah, they haven't provided any information to believe otherwise. I just don't think it was an intentional. Today they were okay, today we're going to kill some of the aid workers because fuck them. But it was.
Yeah, it could be gross negligence. So do you think it was just one, this is going to be the final clarifying question. Do you think it was just one person who's doing the drones, he made a mistake, or do you think it's a negligence top down?
For anything that's involving airstrikes, this is a negligence that's occurring at many levels. For the thing you said earlier about a baby getting shot in the head with a sniper rifle or whatever, it could just be one fucked up soldier that either misses or is actually fucking insane or psychotic and does something. But when it comes to things being hit with airstrikes, this is multiple people are signing off on this at multiple stages. So it could be that there was a failure at a single stage. So there could have been an intelligence failure where they said, we think that whoever's getting into this car is Hamas. But I feel like there still should be other things that are clearing that strike, especially given that these are aid workers that are moving on a pre-approved route that would deter from this type of thing happening. It was an insanely horrible fucking attack. I'm pretty sure the WCK and I think other aid workers pulled out completely after that, and it looked horrible for Israel as well. Yeah.
So this is my final question on this. So when this act of mass negligence, where it's multiple levels, if what you're saying is true, wouldn't that kind of go against the idea that Israel is, the top-down Israel is not being negligent? Wouldn't that kind of go against the point that it's most likely the third option?
No, because I think that if you look overall, again, there are going to be things that happen in war where people fuck up really bad. But even the United States, I wish I remember the year for this. in 2020 or 2019, the U.S. I think we just full out like fucking bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital. I think we just full out like bombed it in Afghanistan. I think it was just a severe and an insane fuck up, and this wasn't even like in a super active hot war zone. Again, I just don't think there's good evidence to show that Israel is like intentionally trying to kill aid workers or intentionally trying to kill Palestinians, because there'd just be so much more evidence of this happening than things happening.
All right, I'll let Kareem take it from here.
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things. You know, you had mentioned about, let's start with the first thing you mentioned about how Sharon did not want to annex the West Bank. That's not true. He was the one to encourage the youth to go and at the hilltops, you know, and this is kind of the slogan of the Hilltop Youth, a terrorist organization.
Kareem, let's try to keep it on.
Yeah, I'm just going point by point. I'm just trying to say that the idea that Sharon did not want to annex the West Bank is not true. And they disengaged in 2005, again, because they wanted to shift resources and wanted to kind of get this carte blanche in front of the international community, and because it wasn't worth. And that's why, by the way, they're slicing Gaza today, like what their plan for Gaza, and why they destroyed 80% of schools, 80% of hospitals, 70% of hospitals, 80% of roads, and why, like you were mentioning, a lot of the times people say, oh, the civilian casualty ratio to people is not that bad, and they say, oh, only 45,000 people died. But look at the stats of how much they destroyed civilian structures and roads, etc. I think their focus is to annex Gaza, and what they want to do is slice Gaza into four different parts with vertical kind of guarding points, so that they can allow settlements to then come and not have a completely unified 1.2 million blanket Palestinians on top of those settlers, right? But going back to what you were saying about the World Central Kitchen, etc. Again, I would say the main focus here, ever since 1919, man, ever since even before, I'm not going to go back in history, but I'm saying like this always existed all the way back to even the Paris Peace Conference of Herzl talking about the Greater Israel, right, of the Euphrates to the Nile, right? And what Smotrich talks about very recently in an interview in a French documentary, talking about seeing Israel stemming from modern day, basically Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and a bit of Egypt, right? So he's talking about this Greater Israel project. So even in 2017, Smotrich talks about a united Judea and Samaria for all Jews. So this idea of annexing the West Bank, annexing Gaza, has existed way before October 7th, right? And I believe October 7th is like the best way to put it was a massacre happened to Israelis, which are fully condemned, and now they're using this massacre as a validation to continue destroying Gaza as much as possible, to then allow for the traffic of settlements later to it, so that they can annex it. The West Bank, they're continually annexing it.
Can you address what Destiny said specifically?
What is it?
The point he's making is that there's probably isolated incidents of negligence, like the World Central Kitchen bombing, but he doesn't think it's an overall like thing where there's just he thinks those are just isolated instances of negligence. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, but I think we're giving Israel too many kind of benefit of the doubt to a degree that we're saying, okay, well, maybe it's only the government of Israel is the one that's crazy. You know, Netanyahu has an arrest warrant, as an application for an arrest warrant for him. You know, oh, it's Ben-Gvir, he's the minister of security, even though he's the minister of security and is a convicted terrorist. Oh, maybe it's just that one guy, you know. And then you kind of these incidents that we're mentioning, we're kind of isolating them as this kind of individual cases, but what we're not looking at is the root source of the ideology that is driving those individuals to do these cases, right? And the ideology behind that supports those people, that pushes those people to do these atrocities, is really intertwined and embedded in government, in the current government of Israel and Israeli structure, and dates back all the way, as I proved to you before, to the creation of Israel. So
yeah, just as a real quick thing, because you see, like, again, I don't like the quotes. Like, you're talking about these quotes at like the Paris conference or whatever, in the early 1900s, 1919, right? I mean, what did you say? You said from the Nile to the Euphrates, but what happened? Like, Israel is forced to contend with political realities on the ground. If they really cared about that, they would have never given back the Sinai to Egypt, right? But they did. Yeah, so they can be forced to contend with the realities of the ground. And also, Sharon wanted to pull out of the West Bank. He literally left the Likud over his disengagement plans and created a whole new party, but he ended up stroking out, and so he couldn't do any of his shit. But like Sharon, I wish I could remember the quotes at the time. I think it's in Ben-Ami's second book, but like Sharon never thought that there was a viable path forward to having settlements in the West Bank, because the demographics weren't there. The same thing that Ben-Gurion and everybody warned before 1967, they don't have the demographics to actually control any of these places. And if they tried to annex them, it would be the end of Israel. And that was true. I don't remember if the it's not Fatima, oh my God, Kadima, maybe I think was the name of the party. I think it literally means like moving forward or progress or something like that. Like Sharon was saying, especially after the second Intifada, right? Because all the violence coming out of that, Sharon was saying like, there is no path forward where Israel is existing in these places because we don't have the demographics for it. So he did want to pull out of the West Bank. That was part of what he wanted, but he stroked out and then he didn't actually do it afterwards. But but Israel is forced to contend with political realities on the ground, something the Palestinians and the Arabs, some of the surrounding Arab states have, but the Palestinians have never like actually contended with. The idea that they need to give something dramatically in any negotiation has never settled in on any of the Palestinian leadership. And again, we can find quotes from Israeli leaders saying, well, from the river to the sea or from the Nile to the Euphrates or this greater Israel plan. But like they've signed agreements and they've signed deals with other Arab states that, to my knowledge, I don't believe they've like really gone back on it also.
Okay, so there's a lot of things you're saying that need to be unpacked. So let's take the thing that you said about how Israel was willing to, like the Palestinians are the ones that are not willing to accept reality on the ground. So you were saying that basically the Israelis signed peace treaties. Okay, let's take the Oslo Accords, 1993. This is an example where both Palestinians and Israelis signed the peace agreement. Okay, so for those who don't know who are watching, the Oslo Accords basically was an agreement that would give the Palestinians the control over Area A of the West Bank, which is 17% of the West Bank. Area B would be mixed shared control, and Area C would be full under Israeli control. So you're talking about an agreement where Israelis would give Palestinians 17% of an already less than 50% land of their own total land that they were living in. So let's say they accepted that. Despite them accepting that, Israel continued to annex Area A, right? So why did they continue to annex Area A if they were committed to peace? And what's so crazy about that is that agreement is first of all, it's unbelievable because Israel would collect all money, the taxes of the Palestinian Authority, which is crazy, and they would control the land and air trade of the West Bank. And what's even crazier than all of that?
Hold on, wait. When you say collect tax money, they also were distributing it back, right? They were just the ones in charge of getting it.
Well, it passed through them, right? And so it's not full Palestinian Authority. That's what I'm trying to prove. And the third aspect, which makes this even crazier than everything, is the prime minister who signed this agreement was assassinated by an Israeli terrorist, right, for signing that agreement. So you're talking about a movement, bro, an ideology that despite the fact that this so-called peace agreement was giving 17% control for an already less than 50% land of Palestine or British mandate Palestine to the Palestinians, the Israeli terrorist assassinated the prime minister for going forward.
Well, hold on. I mean, if we want to bring up assassinations, King Hussein I was assassinated, I believe, in Jerusalem by a Palestinian terrorist because they were so upset with the agreements that Jordan had made to basically stop conquering past Jerusalem. Sadat was assassinated in Egypt ostensibly for signing peace with Israel, and I think it was Hafez Assad said that if he had made any long-term agreements relating to Palestine and Israel, that he would have been shot in the back for it. So I mean, like everybody's assassinating everybody in the Middle East. If you want to get into that, I don't think there's a strong argument one way or another for anything.
But see, the thing is, man, we can't keep, like, for example, at every point where Israel's at fault. I'm not saying that I'm not saying all the Arab countries around Israel don't have their own sense of share in terms of things that I would condemn. I would be the last person to say that. I don't even think the main problem is Israel per se. I think the main problem is extremism of all forms in the region.
Sure, and I agree. But the thing is I'm willing to hold Israel responsible for the things they're doing. But like, has there ever been a solid, realistic peace plan ever presented from the Palestinian side to the Israelis that the Israelis haven't accepted ever?
No, but the thing is, yes, I told the Oslo Accords was an example of that was totally skewed towards Israelis.
Hold on. The Oslo Accords was not a solid peace agreement. It was literally transitionary in nature. That was the whole point of the Oslo Accords, is they were supposed to resolve in 5 years to an actual peace agreement.
Yeah,
it didn't happen. That's why we got Oslo II, and then that's why eventually we had failures at Camp David to make a permanent peace. But the Oslo Accords specifically were not permanent settlements, right? They were supposed to come at the end of a 5-year interim period.
Yes, but you're forgetting that the intent, you're for example, like, let me take your UN partition plan as a very simple example, right? You're assuming that when Israel accepts a peace plan, that it aims to respect it.
They did with Egypt and they did with Jordan, right?
No, but that's different because they're making peace with countries that are on its border that have a military threat to it, and it would gain so much more by making peace with those countries than it would by not doing so. Right.
Okay, but then they did. But then I mean, like, it's not like Arafat or the Palestinians are signing these peace agreements that they're adhering to constantly, right? Like, I mean, That's an issue on both sides. I would agree that the continuing expansions of settlements into Area C was not good under Oslo, but there were also still terrorist attacks that were happening that Arafat wasn't taking a strong stance against under Oslo as well, right? Both sides were kind of fucking each other on it.
Right, but the thing is, every single time that we're talking about, instances where Israel is violating their side of the deal, that's going to make the Palestinians not willing to trust any form of peace agreement that the Israelis would come up with as well.
Yeah, but it's the same thing on the Israeli side too, though. But the difference is, it seems there have been Israelis in the past that have been willing to go all the way to the outer perimeter of what they could possibly agree to with the Palestinians, but the Palestinians haven't had the leadership. Like, when was Arafat ever going to accept a peace agreement with Israel?
But again, right, let's talk about Palestinian leadership, right? Palestinian Authority itself was created majorly, let's say, under like the evolution of the PLO after the Oslo Accords. Again, they're a byproduct of 40 years of Israeli occupation, 60 years of Israeli occupation up to that point. They didn't exist at the kind of, let's say, the beginning of the declaration of Israel. It's not like they were a movement that existed that represented all Palestinians. They existed as a byproduct of that agreement, right? So go back to the root cause. Right? Go back to the root cause. Again, the root problem here is that all the way back from Plan Delay, right? All the way from a plan that would displace 700,000 Palestinians.
Well, hold on. Even you bring up Plan Dalet. Right. That Plan D, that was a military operation in the middle of a war where there was an.
It started before. It started before the war.
No, it didn't.
Yeah,
it didn't. No, it didn't.
Check it.
I don't need to. I know it didn't.
I swear, it started 1.5 months before. I promise. I checked this.
In what year?
It started in 100%. Somebody fact checked this. 100%. It started 1.5 months before the war. But you're right in saying that it extended into the war, the Arab-Israeli war.
Maybe
sure.
I mean, like, if you want to say that, maybe the war in 48, like the War of Israeli Independence, maybe it started before June. But the Civil War started in 47, like almost a year prior to that. And that was why that was planned out. It was basically in response to our shit is getting fucked up by a whole bunch of Palestinian fighters at that point, right? And they had to figure out how to secure actual paths from it wasn't Tel Aviv at that point, right? It was like Haifa or Jaffa or whatever, the fucking ports all the way to Jerusalem. Like, they were fighting against these people, and part of that was the expulsion of Arab villages. But there was like a triangle of villages. There are places where it's not like they expelled every single Arab, and they could have if they wanted to. Like, they kept a sizable portion of Arabs still living in Israel proper, and they could have expelled them all if they wanted to, but they didn't, right?
Well, first of all, like I said, the intent of respecting those peace agreements, the intent of them wanting to make peace with the Palestinians rejects their narratives, when they, let's say, for example, come and make a peace agreement like the Oslo Accords or like the partition plan, and then not respect their part. Like, if you talk every single peace agreement that you would mention, right? Let's say, like, let's go UN partition plan, first one. Ben Gurion has been quoted saying that this is just temporary, that as soon as they get an elite Israeli army, they're going to continue partitioning the rest of Palestine.
Hold on, wait. Who didn't accept the partition plan?
The Palestinians didn't accept the partition plan, but the reason why the Israelis accepted the partition plan was not like they were going to respect the partition plan.
Yeah, but you don't know. The problem is we don't know that because the Arabs always gave cause for war. Much the same that if this was
nobody in the place of the Palestinians would ever accept the partition plan. Would you accept that the land that you used to roam into freely, like if you're you live in Florida and you could roam freely in Florida and your house you've been living there for thousands of years, and let's say the Western country.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, but I just wish you would just admit that it didn't have anything to do with anything any Jewish leader said, and there was no acceptable partition plan. The reality is the Palestinians would have never accepted anything that had Jewish people living there in their own state.
Nobody in the Palestinian streets would ever accept that.
Okay, that's fine, but then just admit that. So, but then we can start from a point of Arab rejectionism. We can justify the rejectionism,
right.
And we can say they felt betrayed by Europe that all these Jews were coming into the Levant, which is fine. Yeah. But we're not going to say that they would have accepted it, except the Jews would have fought in the future. They would have accepted it, except it was too much. That's not true. They wouldn't have accepted anything.
So are you arguing that the Israelis would have respected the partition plan if the Palestinians accepted the partition plan?
Yes, of course they would have. Absolutely.
But that's what I'm telling you. They said they wouldn't. Right? That's what I'm trying to prove.
Yeah, but they also said from the Nile to the Euphrates, and they give the Sinai back to Egypt. So history betrays you. Like, obviously, Jewish leaders have said a lot of things, but I mean, like, Jewish leaders, like
two completely different people said that, Stephen. Two completely different people. In this case, it's the same person. Ben Gurion said, first of all, the acceptance of the partition plan is simply to formalize the state of Israel so that it's not in the air anymore. It's a milestone to formalize on the ground that we do have an Israeli state. And it happened, right? The 1947 UN partition plan was released. It wasn't until later that the declaration of Israel happened, right? And the reason why that is because, and when you're talking about Plan Delay, Plan delay was also, in Ben-Gurion's words, was in response to knowing that the British are going to pull out of Mandate Palestine, and in order to annex as much land so that it supersedes the 55% that the United Nations was going to give Israel. So in their own words, they accepted the partition plan in an interim manner. Even the
hold on, Plan Dalit wasn't part of the partition. Plan Dalit was they were already fighting. They were already fighting a war of extinction. Of course, they're going to push for the strongest borders they can get. They're not getting the 47 borders. They're getting whatever they can fight for, right?
No, but what I'm saying is that what you're doing here is you're explaining it from a contextual analysis, but you're removing the intention.
No, what I'm doing is I'm explaining what happened, and you're trying to give me a hypothetical counterfactual world that you can never prove exists. Like if you're going to sit here and tell me that Israel would have tried to expand as hard as possible given the opportunity to, I'm going to absolutely agree. It happened in 1967. But what I'm telling you is you can never tell me for sure that if Israel had never been given cause for war by any of the surrounding states, that they would have just started a whole bunch of wars on their own to conquer land, because the Arabs already started the wars first. They always kept starting wars.
A hypothetical, like we're not going to be able to argue that in a hypothetical world, what would happen if the Palestinians accepted that. But what I'm telling you is based on their own words. Chaim Weizmann, the president of the World Zionist Organization at the time, said the partition will be only a temporary agreement for the next 20 to 25 years. Because you have to understand that at the time, when Ben-Gurion wanted to accept the partition plan, not everybody in the World Zionist Organization agreed with him. Right? It wasn't something that was unanimously accepted. So the way that Ben-Gurion sold it to the people that were on site said, after the formation of a large army in the wake of the establishment of the state, I'm quoting him directly.
Yes, I'm familiar. Yes, I know there are Weizmann quotes, and I know there are Ben-Gurion quotes. I also know that Nasser said that he was ready to fight a war of destruction against Israel, and he wasn't ready to do it because he'd committed tens of thousands of troops to a failing war in Yemen. But the reality is all the people believed him, and they were ready to go to war, and it was part of largely the instigating factors that led up to the 1967 war actually happening. Just because a leader says something, or is making political promises to his constituents to try to get them to agree to accept an agreement, doesn't mean that 20 years in the future they're absolutely for sure going to go to war. Maybe they would have done unjustified wars, but the reality is they never had the opportunity. They didn't need to because the Arabs were the ones starting wars first. Like, all you can do is argue that hypothetically Israel would have done these things, but you've already told me that Palestinians would have rejected any peace agreement, even if the Israelis hadn't said it. So who cares what the Israelis might have done? We can look at what the Arabs actually did.
So I didn't say the Palestinians would reject any peace agreement. First of all, they accepted the Oslo Accords, right?
And wait. I mean early on in the formation of the State of Israel. And even in accepting the Oslo Accords, the part of the reason why the Oslo Accords sucked and were good is because they didn't actually have any final agreement about what the situation would look like. Nobody had agreed to any borders or any states yet, right?
But again, I think you're not really putting the pin on Israel's intention, right? Like, for example, when Israel continued to annex Area 8, why did it continue to annex Area 8 despite signing a peace
I'm not familiar.
agreement?
What is it? When you said continue to annex Area 8, under the Oslo Accords? When did this?
Yeah, during the Oslo Accords.
What city? Where did they annex? Or what was this?
I'm not sure, but I know that they annexed the Area 8 for sure during 1993 and during the Oslo Accords.
Are you sure it was annexing Area A, or are you sure that it wasn't more that they were redeploying to parts of Area C? Because I don't remember them, and I'm pretty sure they were withdrawing from Area A and B, because Area A is what was handed over to the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian National Authority, and then Area C. I know, for instance, like for Hebron, there were disagreements over that, and it was split into H1 and H2 after the Y memorandum, I think under Netanyahu. But I don't remember them reoccupying parts of Area A or B. I'm pretty sure they withdrew from that and they handed that over to the PNA or the PA.
No, I know for sure that Israel continued to annex Area 8 despite signing the Oslo Agreement. Whether that's a reshuffling population from Area C to Area, I'm not sure. But my point is that this idea that Israel would respect their side of the agreement and that it's the Palestinians that always rejected the peace agreement removes the context by why Palestinians rejected those agreements, right? If you're talking about, for example, why the Palestinians rejected Camp David, I mean, they already saw under the Oslo Accord that Israelis were not subsiding by their side of the agreement, right? What I'm saying is that the intention through every level of plan that you're mentioning, there is clear evidence that the Israelis were not willing to hold their side of the deal. I mean, even in Camp David, Barak, which in my opinion, Yasser Arafat should have agreed with, which was basically, for those who don't know, in the Camp David Summit, there was this agreement. It was kind of this, at the end of this 5-year interim of giving back 95% of the West Bank to Palestinians and 100% of Gaza back to Palestinians, and Arafat disagrees with that. But the reason why he disagreed with that is because there was no formal agreement. It was all oral. And even it's crazy because Barak, the prime minister...
Wait, Camp David wouldn't have been a formal agreement?
Camp David Summit, it was oral. It was never written.
No, yeah, because they didn't reach an agreement.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, again, you're framing it that the Israelis were always the peacemakers and the Palestinians rejected it. What I'm trying to tell you is that every instance where the Israelis seemed like the peacemakers, there's clear evidence of them, either verbally or through action, only accepting this peace agreement as a strategy to advance their aims while simultaneously violating that agreement and in their own words saying explicitly that this is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah,
right?
but everybody's going to accept peace agreements to advance their aims. That's not a bad idea. Like they should be. Like Palestinians should be looking for a peace agreement to advance their aims to create a state and everything.
But that's not what I mean. But that's like you accepting a peace agreement where I'm going to violate your side of the deal.
Yeah, but the issue is the only people who truly said that were people like Arafat. Like he went and he gave speeches over and over again talking about the tribe of Quidibia or whatever. Don't fucking remember. The idea of like a false peace and that we'll accept these as Muslims and then betray them in the future and everything. The reality is that there's never been a peace agreement similar to like Camp David that the Palestinians have put on the table that Israel has walked away from.
When you say the Palestinians have put on the table, how would the Palestinians be able to put that on the table, right? Because they don't have the governments that rule Palestine, again, have been continuously being fragmented by a strategy to split the two-state solution that Smotrich and Netanyahu have put forward through illegal settlements.
Well, so then what's an example of like a single Palestinian deal that's been left on the table?
What do you mean?
Like what's an example of where the Palestinians like, this is what we would accept. We'd be willing to agree to this, and Israeli hasn't done it. Where it's been less than like the full right of return.
You mean that Israel has refused?
Yes.
Well, the problem with that, right, is that who is going to be the person who's going to come and write this peace agreement on behalf of the Palestinians? Who's going to be the Palestinian representative?
Mahmoud Abbas.
Right, but see, again, Palestinian Authority was created out of the Oslo Accords.
Yeah, but the main party in the Palestinian Authority is the Palestinian Liberation Organization, is the PLO, which is a party that's existed since '64.
But then again, right, going back to the source, right, go back to the source always, right? When you're talking about whether there ever was a peace agreement from the side of the Palestinians, the problem is you don't have a representative of the Palestinians.
You had Arafat.
Right?
Arafat was up in. Arafat was in the. It was in the Madrid conference in '91, and he didn't agree to anything. Right. He did the Oslo Accords. He didn't agree to a long-term peace. He did Camp David. He didn't agree to a long-term peace. I mean, why not Arafat? Why didn't he agree to anything?
There are reasons every single step of the way, right?
Okay, wait. So there might be reasons, and I'll concede up. There might be reasons, but then can you tell me? You can admit then the Palestinians have never ever made a coherent peace offer to the Israelis. There might be reasons, but they've never done it before.
The problem with that is how would they? That's my question.
I just gave you examples. They could have said something in Madrid in '91 when Jordan was. That's when the peace.
Okay, so let's take the example of Campus David Summit in 2000, where they said, okay, like the agreement is you would leave the West Bank and you would leave Gaza in exchange, and then at the same time, Barak says, I went to Camp David presuming we'd not be reaching an agreement. I wanted the international community to stand by us when he hit the Palestinians. And so like basically saying that he was just going with the intention of doing this plan, but he knew it was never going to materialize.
What do you mean? They literally, Camp David talks followed at the Taba Summit, like within the year later. They still didn't reach a final agreement. Like this is a place where Arafat could have given a final agreement to everything. And he didn't.
I personally agree with you. Arafat should have approved of it because even though he knew Barak's intentions were probably false, or he intended to not respect the side of the agreement, I still think he should have in terms of the eyes of the international community. But what I'm saying is the reason why the Palestinians or the Arabs at large rejected the plan is because anybody in their shoes would reject the plan.
No, that's not true. Hold on, that's not true, and that's a bad reasoning. Because if you accept a plan and the Israelis reject it or they violate it in the future, now you actually do have an international mandate to come and wrought havoc on Israel. Can you imagine if Israel says, "Okay, we agree to this, we're going to create a Palestinian state," and now Palestine as a country is created, and then Israel tries to attack it? What do you mean? They're going to have like a whole international uprising against them if they were to do stuff like that. So why, even if you thought they were going to disagree with it in the future, backstep in the future, why wouldn't you make that agreement anyway? It would strengthen your position so much.
Well, because again, I told you that every agreement that Israel proposed was completely biased towards Israel, or did not give the Palestinians complete authority or self-independence. That would be like me telling you, man, that you live, I don't know, whatever state you want, Miami or like whatever city you want, and then or let's say Florida. And remember, in the UN partition plan, they gave 55% of that land to Israelis. Let me just explain this, okay? You're living in Florida, cool?
No, you got to stop using the analogies. They don't fit. Even the thing you just said, 55% of the land is Israelis. Go look at the maps. Like 60% or 70% of that land that was given, it was the Negev. It was an empty, dead desert. There's nothing that even happens there.
You're talking about a people that only occupied 8% of the land before 1948.
What percentage did the Palestinians occupy?
The Palestinians were living there.
No, that's not true. Come on. It was 8% from the Israelis, and it was like, I think, 12 or 13% from the Palestinians. There weren't Palestinians scattered all across the Negev.
That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that over the majority of the mandate of Palestine was given to people that occupied the minority between the two people.
Yeah, but the majority of that land was bunk land, and a huge minority of that population would have been Arabs. It was like 55% Jewish people, and it was like 45% Arab Palestinians that would have been part of that 55% created state.
All right, let's let Kareem respond to this in full.
No, but so what? How does that change anything? It also gave the Sea of Galilee, it also gave the Israeli partition the only exclusive access to the Sea of Galilee, right?
No, but they had to fight for access to the Sea of Galilee. They fought a whole war over water for the next decade to the north with Syria to gain access to getting water from the Sea of Galilee.
No, I'm talking about the partition plan itself. I'm talking about the partition plan gave the Israelis over 55% of British mandate Palestine, and they gave them the exclusive access to the Sea of Galilee. That was the UN partition plan. They gave only 45% to the Palestinians. And then, like you said, then the Plan Delay happened. The Israelis ended up taking 76%.
Wait, what did Plan Dalet? Plan Dalet didn't just happen out of nowhere. That happened in response to the Civil War.
After the partition plan.
After the Civil War started.
Yeah, but that happened after the partition plan. It happened after that. Right. And then they annexed 76%. They took 76% of the land of the British mandate, Palestine.
Okay, real quick, I'm going to bring it back because we're going back in history again. I'm going to bring it back in about a minute, but I'll let you guys get one more word in on this.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, what would you do as a Palestinian if your homes are being demolished, if your people are being displaced, and your land is being taken away from you, and the international community does its efforts to pass a law to hold Israel accountable according to the ICJ, according to the United Nations, the Geneva Convention, the Security Council, and Israel does not respect that. The United States keeps funding its atrocities. What do you do as a Palestinian then? I mean, if
like
Israel
today, I think you should just keep fighting. Why not? Yeah, but this is my whole critique of the international community. I think the international community has given both sides reason to basically fight forever. If you're a Palestinian, you should just keep fighting because, like you said, the ICJ and the ICC and everybody is condemning Israel for their action. So you never have to suffer any real political defeat. You don't have to like engage at all in real concessions or engage in real deliberation or negotiation. You're just going to wait for somebody to come and bail you out of everything, I guess. But I think that's super toxic to the entire environment.
Wait, let me just confirm this. So, Destiny, you're saying that the thing that Palestinians should be doing, or you would be doing if you were in their shoes, is to keep fighting. Like,
yeah, why not? Yeah, why would you ever negotiate with Israel? What a stupid thing to do. If the international community is just going to keep condemning them and everything, just keep fighting. Fuck it.
Well, because a lot of your people die. Like,
yeah, but I don't. I mean, they just blame it all on Israel, right?
Well, it doesn't matter if your fucking dad is dead. You know who you can blame. But all right, I'll let Kareem go from here.
No, but I get where you're coming from. But the idea is that you spoke a lot about peace agreements and how Israel is willing to, concede through peace agreements. I explained to you through different peace agreements how they're, despite them maybe accepting it publicly, that's in a sinister manner or behind the scenes manner, they had other plans. And I was trying to explain that. Now you have a much more clear example where the international community unanimously at times, there are resolutions where even the United States famously abstained and didn't even use their veto power, especially regarding settlements in the West Bank, right? And so now you have a much more clear example where Israel could say, you know what, we're the good guys, we're going to follow international law, and we're going to let the international community help us with the situation. Why don't they do that? Why don't they accept the ruling way before? And now you could say, oh, because there's Palestinian radicalization in response to what happened. But why didn't they do that way before, dating back to 1967 and after? Why didn't they do that immediately?
Wait, why would they do it immediately? In 67, where did the 48 borders come from?
What do you mean? After the partition plan, after Israel declared independence?
The 48 borders were forged in war. They were war borders, right? And then in 67, they got territory that had been previously occupied by Egypt and Jordan, right? And then, they fought wars for all of these things after the other side had been going to war over and over again. Why would they suddenly say, okay, now that we survived this like second or third war of extinction, now let's all follow international law? Like, what do you mean? They were surrounded by enemies on all sides.
If you're going to argue it from that lens, then you need to go a step before, right? If you're going to argue it from that lens, you need to understand why the riots in 1920s happened, right? Why were the Palestinians who initially accepted Jewish immigration or were okay with it, why did they eventually riot with it? Because the amount of mass immigration from Europe to the British Mandate of Palestine was to a degree that the self-determination, the sovereignty of the Palestinians were being affected. Again, it's like me telling you...
Hold on, I don't need to... Don't misunderstand me. If I was an Arab in 48, I would have fucking fought against Israel. If I was an Arab in 67 and 73, I probably would have fought against Israel. I don't even know if I'd necessarily blame them. I understand why, but I'm saying we can't pretend, like you can't in one end of your mouth justify why they fought them and say this is why they deserve to and they had a righteous cause, and I'd probably even agree with that, but then in the next go, well, they would have accepted peace, it would have just been fair. No, they wouldn't have. They wanted to expel these motherfuckers from the continent. And I get it why, but like we're past that now, unfortunately. They lost the wars and now here we are. We need to settle up.
So let me ask you this. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. So you accept that if you were there, if you were an Arab there, that you would probably react in the same way. You were seeing this kind of mass immigration into your lands. You're saying like, what the fuck? We have no power over our own sovereignty. The British are...
Yeah, and I probably would have done the same as the Jews as well. We're getting holocausted across all of Europe. Britain said that we could come down here, and now we're going to fucking come down here. Fuck them, yeah. I understand why both sides do what they do, yeah.
Kareem, let's respond to this. I'm going to bring it back. So
yeah, no, I get where it's coming from. My question would be, is what would you do now, knowing that if you were a Palestinian at the time, you would have done the same thing, and now that the international community is doing its efforts to try to, quote unquote, intervene in the situation and try to create some sort of objective standard that all the countries are on board with.
Let's let Destiny answer that, and then I'm going to bring it back. Go ahead. Yeah.
I would say that I'm the United States, and I would tell the United States that any country that meddles in between any of these affairs is going to get nuked off the face of the earth. And then I would go to Jerusalem, and I would bring Mahmoud Abbas and maybe any other Palestinian leaders, and I would bring Netanyahu and any Israeli leaders, and I would say, here's what's going to happen. You guys need to negotiate a deal. I'll give you 2 years to do it. And then if you guys aren't able to negotiate a deal between the two of you, whoever was willing to give more, you get 20 F-35s and however many fucking guns you want, and you just go and blow up and kill the other side because this is fucking stupid. That's what I would do. Tell them that somebody's going to figure this out. Otherwise, one of you guys is going to get blown up, and then peace, and that's it.
Destiny 2028.
Yeah. The issue is that, like, unironically, the issue is that both sides are incentivized to fight forever. If you were an Israeli and you made peace, you would be stupid. Why? Keep taking over the West Bank, keep seizing territory, continue on with the Abraham Accords, make peace. You should just do that. Why would you ever make peace with the Palestinians, right? Just keep going. And if you're a Palestinian, why the fuck would you make peace with the Israelis? They're genociding you, they're apartheiding you, the ICC, the ICJ, everybody else going after them. Just fucking wait for the international community to bail you out. That's the problem. The international community is dog shit when it comes to supporting both sides of this region, in my opinion.
Yeah, the international community also doesn't quite often bail out countries in time. Okay, so here's one other instance I want to bring up. It's that famous story of the rape of, I don't know if he was a boy or a man, but by the IDF soldiers. But that part is okay. There's a few bad apples, but then protesters broke them out of jail. And then the craziest part is then half of them had their charges dropped. So how would you, I guess let's first go to Destiny. How would you account for something like that? Like what is going on? The climate in Israel is so bad that these people are breaking out rapists. And then why would the court drop the charges on half of them?
I don't know. I would have to go and I would need to be more familiar with the details of this case. Like it could be that people didn't believe the charges. It could be that people are just so ass pained at Palestinians that they don't give a fuck what the Israeli soldiers do. I don't know who's involved. Like I can imagine a whole bunch of scenarios from crazy unjustified things to I understand why people do. Just I don't know the details, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll let Kareem get a word in on this. And I'm gonna bring up another instance.
All I know about this situation is the person who was being raped was apparently a terrorist, like Hamas terrorist.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Right, and potentially, and then basically a lot of Israelis protested against the fact that Israel was going to jail or prosecute the people who raped that terrorist. So they felt this perspective that, oh, this guy's a terrorist, so our people are raping him. Why are you putting our people in jail? That was kind of their perspective, and to me that like eradicates any moral fabric that is objective in this scenario. For me, I think that if you're going to get gang raped in fucking prison, if you gang rape a person, whether they're terrorists or not, I think the terrorist definitely needs to be held accountable for what he has done. But I don't think that the answer to that is being okay or dropping charges for people who gang raped an individual. Right.
Yeah, something like that would not happen in America, I believe. But okay, let me since this is like something Destiny hasn't really like studied too close to them, and just move on to another thing. The open letter from the 99 medical doctors. So for the chat, I'm sure you guys both know what I'm talking about. But for the chat, essentially, and someone could correct me if I get any part of the story wrong, but there was 99 Western doctors, most of them from America, some of them from England, who went to Gaza as part of a mission. So they have these like whatever doctors have these like groups where they do like volunteer work and stuff like that. They went down there and they wrote an open letter to the American government. Recently it was revealed, and they made some claims. They said that basically little children are getting sniped in the head, and that they all believe it's a genocide. So I just want to see what you guys both think about this specifically.
I'd have to look into the individual instances they're talking to. I really don't trust anything that comes out of that region without like reading it myself, because everybody fucking lies about it. So especially like I don't know why doctors think they're in a position to decide whether or not a genocide is occurring. That's a pretty like international law pilled thing. But if they think they saw like individual things that are inexplicable or injuries that were evidence of something else, I mean like that's valid. But yeah, I don't know why I would care about a doctor's opinion on whether or not a genocide is occurring.
I don't think they're talking about legally. I think they're talking about morally. I think the point that we're making in the letter is like, yeah, where civilians are purposely being targeted. I don't think they're trying to make a legal argument like, hey, this is legally a genocide. So just to clarify that.
I mean, genocide is a legal term, so.
Yeah, but can also.
Here's the thing. Go ahead, Alice.
No, go ahead, Kareem.
So here's the thing, Destiny, Steven. The thing is, bro, is that you're mentioning a lot of examples where, let's say, there's instances where Israel has deliberately killed civilians, right? Yeah. Now it was, okay, those are a few bad apples. Then we said, okay, Israel is violating international law. Then you said, you know what? Other countries in the region are violating international law too. We said Israel is not, is using white phosphorus. That's completely illegal. International
using
law.
white phosphorus is not completely illegal, but.
I mean, no, but for in areas where there's a lot of density of civilians to displace, like to move civilians around, it is, right? And there are
phosphorus is considered a weapon of illegal use when you're using it to attack civilians with it. You can use it to retreat quickly from areas or to create smoke screens. I don't believe there was ever compelling evidence used to show that it was being used on civilians, because if it was, people would say that rather than just saying white phosphorus is a weapon.
There has been documents of that, of using it in areas where civilians were there.
Correct. Right? Yeah, but I mean, all of Gaza is an area where civilians are. Yeah, the question is whether they're shooting it at civilians or using it to attack civilians. Or
but see, civilians are still experiencing the white phosphorus, man. You know what I mean? But let me ask you this.
Well, here, I'm curious. How is it that? Do you believe that 80% of Gaza is destroyed?
Do I believe that 80% of Gaza is destroyed in terms of infrastructure?
Yeah.
If I'm basing my information or a perception from stats, I would say yeah.
So why isn't 80% of the population dead, or 50% of the population dead, or 10% of the population dead? What's happening that's making it so the destruction on the buildings is happening so much, but it seems like there's not the population death to match it?
Well, it's probably displacement, right? It's probably a lot of Palestinians would leave if they were told or known that there was going to be a bomb being dropped here or a military.
Well, if they were told, who were they been told by?
Well, Israel, sometimes they would tell them, right?
Why would you tell people beforehand if you were planning on genociding them?
Because the whole international community is now watching Israel's every step, right? Like they're incentivized to be careful, right? Like the Pope today launches, like literally goes on the stage and says, we need to launch an international study or international analysis into what's happening in Gaza, whether it's a genocide or not. So Israel is also incentivized to be extremely cautious and do everything that they can.
Okay, so like for that WCK bombing, do you think they did that intentionally or was that negligence?
That's hard to say, man.
Well, why would you think? So why would you think they could do it intentionally if the whole world is watching even more closely at that point?
Why did they do it despite the whole world watching?
Yeah.
Well, usually when you have attacks like this, there's two reasons why you would do it. One would be either it's complete negligence or complete hatred towards another people or wanting to weaponize aid, weaponize kind of, support for the Palestinians in whatever way possible. The other is to send a message, The other could be also from an intelligence perspective to send a message that whether you're a humanitarian group or not, if you're supporting Palestinians on the ground, you're not safe. I mean, UNRWA literally was labeled as a terrorist organization a few days ago by Israel, right? So United Nations.
Do you think that was unfair?
I mean, I think that it's something that, definitely I think it's unfair because it's the only arm as well that is giving aid to Palestinians, right?
Well, doesn't COGAT and aren't there other people that administer aid inside the Gaza Strip as well?
No, sorry, I'm referring to the United Nations. The only arm.
UNRWA. Yeah, I understand for UNRWA. Yeah, but wasn't UNRWA involved in being next to places that had Hamas operating out of it without reporting any of it?
Well, see, that's the thing that Israel always says, right? Why don't they provide? This is my question to you. It's like, why don't they just, let's say, if they have proof that Hamas, terrorists exist under a hospital. First of all, that doesn't validate dropping a bomb on a hospital and killing innocent fucking patients.
Well, I mean, it does, right?
No, I mean, if you're living, I don't know where you are in New York, and there's fucking, terrorists that are in the Empire State Building or in the hospital next to you, it doesn't validate the American government to drop bombs.
If there are militants fighting on top of my house and they're fighting against an opposing military, the military can bomb my house even if they're following rules of war. Like that can.
Are we talking about legally or
legally,
talking about ethically?
Legally.
Okay. No. I'm talking about if you have terrorists that are under a hospital in your city and are under malls in your city. You'd be okay with the American government literally carpet bombing the entire city?
Ethically, not legally.
I mean, I wouldn't be okay. It would suck for me, but I mean, in terms of rules of war, I mean, the question is, do you believe that Hamas operates in a way to maximize civilian deaths?
I don't know, bro. I'm not a representative of Hamas.
Wait. Do you think that Hamas uses human shields?
I know that IDF uses human shields.
Do you think Hamas uses human shields?
I have never had any proof where I've read that Hamas uses human shields. I don't disprove of it. I don't know.
Do you think that oh God, I forgot the name of the hospital. What's the name of the really famous hospital that was what?
Al-Shifa Hospital?
Al-Shifa Hospital. Do you believe that Hamas was operating out of Al-Shifa Hospital, like Amnesty International reported in 2014?
But you're asking me a question where it would be impossible for me to know an answer where there's no evidence that was presented for the answer.
So you don't think there's any good evidence that's been presented that Hamas is inducing deaths from civilians?
Saying that Israel has never provided international community
There
evidence.
was a united Kareem. There was a united.
No. I'm just curious. I'm interested. So you don't think there's any evidence that Hamas operates in a way that? Do you think that Hamas, for instance, why do they fight with no uniforms in the Gaza Strip?
Right, but see, again, right, you're giving me a question where you ask me, do I think that Hamas is not doing that? Right, that's a question that's formulated in a way where the only answer that I would give you, if I gave you a yes, it would be my opinion. And if I gave you,
I'm asking for your opinion. Do you think Hamas?
Yeah, I would think that they would do that, of course, because it would be in the best interest from their perspective to do that, right?
Okay. Do you think Hamas did Hamas do anything to create designated safe zones or humanitarian corridors for civilians?
Yeah, but Hamas is not a representative.
Yes, they are.
The people.
They are the administrators to the region. Of course they are.
34% supported by the people there.
It doesn't matter. They're the administrators to the region. Who else? They're literally the people that do policing.
But see again, why would Hamas exist in the first place? Why did Hamas?
Doesn't matter why they would exist. You said it themselves. They were elected in 2005, right?
Why did they even come? Why did
Kareem, just to be fair, since I'm trying to hold both of you guys like accountable to questions, the reasons for why they exist is not relevant to the specific thing. They exist. We're starting like 5 years from now or 5 years before. They exist, even if the reasons for them existing are purely Israel's fault. The fact is they exist. So he's asking you if you think that they're doing this.
Bro, I'll be very blatant and explicit. I think Hamas is a terrorist group. I think what they did on October 7th is wrong. But I don't think that what they did justifies Israel carpet bombing 80%.
That's not the argument.
On October 7th, do you think Hamas intentionally targeted civilians?
Yes, of course. They say that they intentionally targeted civilians.
Okay. And why do you think they don't have a uniform when they fight inside the Gaza Strip?
I have no idea about that. I've never read into that, actually.
Do you think they built tunnels underneath civilian infrastructure?
I don't know. That's the thing. You're asking me questions that are impossible for me to know unless Israel or Hamas provides evidence of that, right? But the problem is, let me ask you this. Why doesn't Israel, knowing that there are supposed tunnels under a hospital, why didn't they provide proof of that to the international community?
They have. We've literally seen them do walkthroughs of them.
Yeah, but see, again, there are videos of that where they go into tunnel once. There were many videos, again, in Lebanon where they said Hezbollah was hiding gold under a hospital. That was complete bullshit, right? There's a lot of things that Israel said that were later disproven by other objective kind of bodies in the region or that are looking.
Wait, do you disagree that there are like hundreds of miles of tunnel beneath the Gaza Strip that Hamas?
No, I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm saying that what Israel should do, if that's the case, is provide proof of that detailed to the international community instead of using that as just simply an excuse to carpet bomb a hospital.
Literally done. You know that we can Google, we can look at CNN tunnels Hamas operation. Like everybody, nobody reasonable disputes the existence of these things. Like everybody agrees that these things exist.
I'm not saying they don't exist, but I'm saying that does not validate killing, carpet bombing a church, a mosque, an entire
Why do you keep saying carpet bombing when we said 80% of the place was destroyed, but 80% of the civilians aren't dead? 50%. You said that they gave warnings before, and that's not carpet bombing, is it?
I'm telling you that there's an explicit, deliberate, completely eradicating or destroying civilian infrastructure, right? So, for example, why would it be that when Israel would take, for example, a region and it completely displaces the people, already pushed everyone out? Why would they then bomb mosques and churches or community centers after the people are no longer there in it?
Because Hamas operates out of those, and they store weapons and ammunition inside of them.
But why don't they provide evidence of that?
They literally do. For instance, that the tents that were destroyed that caused like 60 civilians to die, I think, in the bombing, was it like 4 or 5 months ago? Like they literally showed video evidence of right next to all of these tents where the people were, there was a truck that literally had these explosives inside of them that went off during this attack. Like they show videos and images of this shit all the time.
This is what you're saying, Destiny. This is what you're saying. You're saying that because, let's say, there's a store of ammunition next to a refugee camp, that Israel has the right to come and send a missile that would end up killing innocent civilians. So that means deliberately, in their intention, they don't give a fuck.
Hold on, wait. This is a separate claim you're making now. But do you acknowledge that they have shown evidence of these things existing?
I've never seen it personally, but I'm trying to prove to you that still doesn't validate the fact that they.
Well, no, dude. That wasn't what we were trying to prove. We were asking whether or not there was even evidence of this stuff happening. But
No, I'm saying I've never seen any evidence of that. I'm saying if they should have talked about it to the international
well, they
community
have
more
a ton. They've shared a ton, and tons of people have seen. Like the Al Ali Hospital, right? It was just probably a failure from a rocket that went off from a Palestinian Islamic Jihad that landed in the parking lot and blew up. Like that was, like.
Okay, so listen. Let me ask you this, Stephen. Again,
Well, that's up for dispute, but yeah,
That's not up for dispute. Nobody reasonable disagrees.
I did hear that was kind of controversial, but
It's not.
this is my question to you, right? All these things that you're mentioning to me, if you're living in Gaza or living at that time, and you're an innocent civilian, as you said, Gaza is completely very, very dense city in terms of infrastructure, right? In terms of population as well. So Israelis know, especially with the type of technology that we have today, that if they're going to throw a military, if they're going to do an airstrike, it's going to probably collaterally damage this entire neighborhood. It's going to damage a lot of civilians. It's going to kill a lot of civilians. So why would they go ahead and do that when simultaneously, when they're fighting in Lebanon or in Syria, they would target specific, they would even target the story, like the level.
I think Kareem is making the point that Israel, when they want to be, can be very precise. Like when they
Exactly.
assassinate these
I think
leaders.
Israel has been very precise. I think that's why you've seen such a huge infrastructure with destruction without there being so many civilian deaths that would match the level of destruction.
No, but what Alice is saying is there's an intention not to be precise when they could be precise.
You think they could be more precise than they are now?
Of course.
in Gaza.
Yeah, of course not. Where's the obvious intention from that?
They can use more boots on the ground. They can clear more people out.
But why do you think more boots on the ground would be less violent? They literally did a hostage extraction with special forces, and over 200 Palestinians were killed in that operation.
I mean, I haven't read into exactly how many percentage of that were Hamas members or not. It's because if you're talking about a hostage extraction.
How is the World Central Kitchen bombing precise though? Like
That's literally an airstrike. What do you mean? It was precise. Wait, that was super precise. What do you mean? They targeted 3 different vehicles.
Precision is killing your enemies. Precision is not killing like humanitarian aid workers. That's not.
I'm just saying having boots on the ground, in terms of they shot exactly what they targeted. They were high precision, maybe low accuracy is what we're saying. It was precise, but I'm saying that boots on the ground is not necessarily like we've got videos of for instance, some of the examples you were bringing up earlier is like a child being sniped in the head. That's boots on the ground. That's people fighting on the ground. Like there were the Israeli hostages that were released, and both 2 hostages were killed initially by Israeli soldiers, but for boots on the ground. It's a way more chaotic situation.
Sure. I mean, in this case, because the individual soldiers are not subscribing to a moral ethic or any international law, which they have to be held accountable for, right?
Wait. Do you think that they just did it because they were killing everybody? Or do you think that was a mistake that happened in the middle of the fighting?
You think it's a mistake to snipe a baby in the head? I don't think it's a mistake.
No, I'm talking about the hostages that were killed.
I'm talking about the snipers. I was referring to the
I would have to look at that particular honestly, I don't know if I believe. I'm going to be just to be super clear. I would have to see that. I don't know if I believe a baby was sniped in the head.
There were many instances of that, and that's kind of what he was talking about.
Like with a 50 BMG round, with a 50 caliber, like the head would explode. No, or what?
Hang on, Kareem. Can you quickly address what he said about the hostages?
About the more boots on the ground, right?
The Israeli hostages, why would they do this on purpose? Why would they kill their own people on purpose? Or why would that happen? Basically, I think that's
why would what happen?
Why would Destiny repeat that point about the hostages, the Israeli hostages?
I just don't know why we would expect boots on the ground would cause less deaths than airstrikes. I think boots on the ground could be just as chaotic or more chaotic depending upon what's going on than airstrikes could be.
There's already boots on the ground though. We just have to be. That's just
sure.
Important. You mean more boots on the ground, right?
I think what you're arguing is boots on the ground has been more. It has killed a lot of innocent civilians as well. I wouldn't argue that it's more chaotic. Especially if you're comparing, most people have been killed by airstrikes. They haven't been killed by boots on the ground. So it's hard to argue that, you know what I mean? Because you would have to then compare what would happen if the entire war in Gaza was only boots on the ground versus airstrikes, right? But going back to what you were saying before, man, I would say that at the end of the day, there are many instances that we talked about where the Israeli army has deliberately killed innocent civilians. We call them bad apples. There's many quotes or genocidal statements that are said by Israeli politicians of completely exterminating Palestinians, right? There are airstrikes that have bombed and eradicated roads, civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, churches, some of the oldest churches in the world, mosques, okay? All of these individual bad apples have to start appearing as a tree that comes from one root source, and that root source is an ideology of supremacy, of complete negligence towards another people, and this belief that the only way of protection or self-sovereignty as an Israeli in the land, which personally, as a Muslim, I believe that all Jews have the right to live in the lands of Israel. All people don't know that. And that's why Jews were living in the lands of Israel before.
As second-class citizens.
That's very arguable.
That's not arguable. They lived as second-class citizens.
Wait, hang on. I want Kareem to finish this point. I want Destiny to respond to it because
first, Arabs are also second-class citizens comparing to Turks in the Ottoman Empire, so you could argue that. But we'll talk about. I know what you're referring to. We'll talk about that. But it's also the only place in the world at the time where Jewish kind of representation, at the level where Jewish culture was vibrant. Jews were not treated in the same way as they were treated in Europe. I'm not saying they were treated perfectly, but I'm saying comparing to any other place in the world, they were treated definitely at a different level of
respect. Please finish your initial point, because I think you're making a good point.
So it's just my point is that we can't keep saying that Israel's violations of international law, those individual kind of deliberate killing of innocent civilians, the demolishment of homes, demolishment of civilian infrastructure are just individual bad apples, because they've happened over a huge span of time. Like, Stephen, I completely agree with you, bro. If like this happened once or this happened some instances, right? But this has been happening since the beginning of the time that we've been recording any Israel atrocity on Palestinians, all the way back from 1948 till now, at different levels, right? So this deliberate killing of innocent civilians and those mistakes that Israel keeps saying, oh, we're going to do an investigation on, it can't be completely by coincidence every time. There has to be an ideology that is motivating those attacks to happen. Because
let's let Destiny respond to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I mean, like if you ignore every single thing the Arabs have done and you hyperfixate on every mistake the Israelis have made, then I mean, we can write this narrative, but the reality is there was no answer given, or there was even a concession given to the idea that, I mean, as in like here's a really simple one. What would have happened in 47 if Palestinians would have won the war, the civil war? What would have happened to the Jewish people?
But you're asking me questions that I completely cannot tell you.
Exactly. In 48, what would have happened if the Israeli state would have lost exactly. In 67, what would have happened? In 73, what would have happened?
All right, Kareem, really quickly respond to that, and I want Destiny to address your initial question.
No, what I'm just saying is I could ask you the same question. What would have happened if Israel respected their part of the Oslo Accords? What would have happened if Israelis accepted the white paper in 1939 and there was a Palestinian state with a Jewish minority living in it? What would have happened? I could have asked you the same questions. You know,
let's give Destiny time.
Well, but then, but if you want to give me a counterfactual, I'll try to answer. What would have happened if Jews would have lived in a minority in an Arab state? I would imagine probably the same thing that happened to them across the entire Middle East, where they were being pogromed, where they were being discriminated against, where they had to live as second-class citizens. There's a reason why there are 50 times more Arabs living in Israel today than there are Jews living across every single Arab state combined, right? There's a reason why Israel won wars in 48. Yeah. They didn't expel every single Palestinian. Even when you want to talk about Plan Dalit, they didn't expel every single Palestinian Arab, even from within Israeli borders. They didn't expel all the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip or from the West Bank when they took it over in 67. They didn't expel every single Palestinian when they withdrew in 2005 when they did disengagement. I mean, we can look at the examples of how Israel treats its enemies. It's not always great sometimes, but they do make peace when they're forced to, when the enemy wants to make peace. And they do respect agreements that they've made, even if you say hypothetically some that they don't. And when they defeat their enemies, they don't try to genocide them or completely expel them because they've had the opportunity to, and they haven't done it over and over again.
So when you're saying
wait, hang on. Destiny, can you please answer the initial question that he asked?
What was it?
He was basically saying that there's all these incidents that it can't just be a coincidence. There has to be a pattern there. And
no, there doesn't. No, it's a huge war involving tons of people. Like if we were to go and look at
we're talking about now, right?
Even now, we can find tons of examples of crazy things happening on both sides. I'm sure that there is, like, if you want to find a pattern or say there's a pattern of behavior, it might be that the training is lax. It might be that there is some genuine hatred amongst the soldiers. It might be that maybe there are even systemic problems in the way that they approach things. I think, for instance, a really great pointed criticism that one can make towards the Israeli government is I don't think that the military government or the military courts do a great job at holding Israeli soldiers accountable when they make when they do bad things, when they do like just horribly bad things. I could be wrong, but I want to say that I think Lonerbox has done this, and I think I've gone this before. I don't know if any Israeli soldier has ever been sentenced to more than I don't know if it was 14 years or maybe less than that, has ever been sentenced to huge prison sentences, even when they do things that are just obviously demonstrably 100% incorrect, shooting a person on the ground after they've already been disarmed, or committing other war crimes or atrocious behavior. This is a problem for sure, 100%. But then to say that Israel is not living up to their Western democratic values and they're being horrible, and then meanwhile you've got people like Hamas who are supported by the Houthis and Hezbollah and Iran, it's not even close to comparable.
Yeah, but hang on, Kareem. They're not mutually exclusive. We can all agree that Hamas is a terrorist group that targets civilians, that uses human hostages, but whether they are that or not doesn't change what Israel's doing. Right?
Yeah, but the both sidesing of it is absurd, and I think there's a lot of power level hiding happening as well. When we are so keen to know every single instance of what about when this baby got shot in the head and by Israel in this one protest that happened in response to the Israeli prison rape that happened and what court and then it's like, does Hamas use human shields? I don't know, I've never heard of that before. Does Hamas fight outside of a uniform? I don't know, I've never heard that before. Do they store weapons underneath mosques or schools? I don't know, I've never heard that before. Do they not fight from tunnels that are underneath like hospitals? I don't know, I've never heard that before. Like we've never heard of the entirety of Hamas tactics that have been investigated by Amnesty International, the Israeli military, like other UN bodies. Like everybody knows about these things. How have you heard none of these things? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Let me extend an olive branch to you. If you're talking about violations of international law that Hamas has committed, I'm 100% with you. Hamas has committed huge violations of international law, especially on October 7th, the rape of innocent civilians, the killing of innocent civilians. I'm 100% condemn that. But there's a big difference, bro. There's a big difference, Destiny, when Israel, a state that holds itself as a Western democracy and brands itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, comes and does that and violates international law and has detainees that are illegal in its prisons.
No, there's not. No, there's not. With all due respect, that's ridiculous. If Israel was an authoritarian dictatorship and they did bad things, I would still say that's a bad thing. If they were a democracy and they did bad things, I'd still say that's a bad thing. Just because they're a democracy doesn't mean I'm going to hold them to a different standard than the surrounding states when it comes to use Kogans, when it comes to these very fundamental and vital parts of how you treat.
It does because Hamas is not going in public and saying we're peacemakers and we've never hurt anybody and we're a diplomatic group. They're not the ones that are branding themselves as this diplomacy.
Well, if they're not branding themselves as a peaceful diplomatic group, then shouldn't Israel just go to war in Gaza and eradicate all of them? Does that mean you support the war in Gaza?
I think there's just a big hypocrisy that Israel brands itself as this peaceful nation when it's also the only Western democratic nation that has a convicted supporter of terrorism as its Minister of Security. It's the only. It has the most amount of UN violations against it. It has a literally active arrest application towards its prime minister. So I don't think that you can hold. I don't think not holding Israel accountable to these standards or saying that.
What do you think when we say that they have an arrest application to the prime minister?
An application for it.
The application. Wait. What about the application? Where's the application for the arrest of Bashar al-Assad or any of the Houthi leaders?
I'm with you on that. I mean, there was an application for Sinwar as well. I mean, it's not like there wasn't.
For all three of the Hamas leaders, right, who are now dead. But I'm just saying that like the idea like we need to follow international law, we need to do this. Like, okay, well, you've got crazy stuff that's happening in the rest of the region that the international law doesn't seem to care about. So
are you saying that Israel is okay? So are you saying that it's completely valid that Israel doesn't follow international law, that those individual barbaric incidents are completely validated because of war? So what will
I'm saying that appeals to international law are hollow and empty, and that the reality is that region has never functioned in accordance really with international law, and none of the players there have functioned in accordance with international law. So for somebody to come in and wag their finger at one country and say you're not doing a great job following international law when all of the borders were armistice lines that were carved in blood, like it's stupid to do that. Like the reality is any agreement that is going to be reached there is going to be done through bilateral negotiations or multilateral negotiations towards the parties on the ground. It's not going to be the UN saying, well, international law says this is illegal, so figure this out. That's never going to happen.
No, but the thing is, right, if me and you are in conflict, right, we need a third party that's going to hold us accountable. Okay, if you and I are in continuous conflict, the whole point of there being international law is there's a set of standards that everybody could be held accountable for.
Yeah, but it only works when everybody's following it, right?
Right, 100%.
Yeah, but nobody's holding the Palestinians or any of the other surrounding states accountable.
No, but Israel has been violating way before Hamas has ever existed.
Yeah, but the Palestinians were violating it before Hamas existed.
How were they violating it? There was no Palestinian Authority before 1991. So
the PLO existed since '64.
The PLO is not. It wasn't a represent like 1967. After 1967, you have that kind of representation. So between 1948 and 1967, let's say, Israel still committed those barbaric crimes. They still committed displacement of innocent homes, right? They still were violating those standards.
Yeah,
right?
but every single person in the region was violating those standards, right?
Why do you mean every single person in the region was violating those standards?
Well, what were the Palestinians from 48 to 67?
What do you mean?
Where were they?
They were in the British Mandate. They were in Palestine. Well, it wasn't British Mandate. It was Israel at the time. But they were in Palestine.
Well, but what was the Gaza Strip and what was the West Bank before 67?
They were just Palestinians living there under martial law. They were treated as third-class citizens
by Egypt and by Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
So
and by Israel as well.
No, by Egypt and Jordan. The West Bank was occupied by Jordan. The Gaza Strip was occupied by Egypt, right? Egypt put in a fake government. They recalled it back to Cairo and they disbanded it in a year. And I think Jordan, the Arab occupation of the West Bank was so unpopular. Hussein I was assassinated by the I forget the name of the new Sarabi or whatever family in 52. Like Palestinians were occupied by Arabs on both fronts. And I'm pretty sure Syria even took land in the north as well. I don't remember exactly where, but even Syria had like encroachment on those borders. So I mean, like everybody in the region was violating international law all the time, and nobody seemed to care.
Well, you're referring to Palestinian resistance. Why does Palestinian resistance exist? It exists in response. It's not in a vacuum, right? That's what I'm trying to argue.
You keep saying that, and I agree with that, but Israeli resistance isn't in a vacuum either. Why do you think Israeli resistance is in a vacuum?
You can't call it Israeli resistance, and you can call it in certain instances now Israeli resistance, but it didn't start as Israeli resistance always.
Of course it did. What do you mean? It literally did, right?
So like I told you, right, from the beginning, the whole mass immigration of Jews to the region was already foreseen to have to lead into the killing of innocent civilians and innocent Arabs.
No, it didn't have to. They literally, the way that they mass immigrated was by buying land from Arabs and then having them leave after they bought it.
Right. But there was an expectation that by doing that eventually that they would piss off the Arabs and there would be revolt.
Wait, Kareem, can you address Destiny's point? The idea
I get his point, but I'm saying that I took you back all the way to the words of Ben Gurion himself. Right?
Words are cheap. The words don't matter. Like,
no, but I think the point is that Destiny's trying to make, you correct me if I'm wrong, Destiny, is that no one in that part of the region plays by international rules. So why would Israel play by the rules? Is that kind of your point, Destiny?
Kind of. I mean, they should. I think they should as well as they can. But I'm going to understand that, like, when they're in that region functioning with a whole bunch of other actors that are acting insane, like it's going to be,
Well, it's okay, sure. Yeah, respond to that.
But if that's the case, that Israel cannot like label itself as a Western democracy or a democracy in the Middle East. It has to either one of those things.
This is fake. This is a fake argument. You don't believe this. If Israel were to suddenly say, okay, we're going to stop calling ourselves a democracy, are you all of a sudden okay with everything Israel's doing?
No, but at least
then this is a waste of time argument. Nobody cares about this argument. The Arab states laugh at this argument. This is a joke argument. Nobody cares about this.
It matters a lot because you're talking about an undeniable, inviolable support from the United States to a country in the Middle East, with the whole argument basis that it's the only democracy.
That doesn't make any sense at all because we've been paying Egypt since '79. We give tons of money to tons of countries. Why do you think Egypt agreed to make peace with Israel? Like we pay non-democracies all the time.
Very different type of relationship, Destiny, between U.S. and Egypt and U.S. and Israel.
Yeah, but we still give them money. Why wouldn't we give Israel money? Even if Israel wasn't a democracy, they'd still be a U.S. ally. It's not like we supported democracies when we were helping people coup countries in the. It's not like Pinochet was going to be a democratic leader, or it's not like Batista was the best democratic leader in South America. Like.
Kareem, wait, can you really quickly address this? So the point Destiny's making, because I feel like sometimes you guys talk past each other, which always happens in these discussions. The point that Destiny's making is the fact that Israel is a Western democracy doesn't really have any kind of bearing on what they should be held to a higher standard. It doesn't really have any bearing on basically the discussion at hand.
The whole point of calling yourself a democracy is that the people voted the people. Like, for example, if Israel passed a judiciary reform that was shot down by the Supreme Court eventually, you can't say that Israel is a democracy and is a country that represents kind of all the people living in it, and then at the same time have a government that removes the law of the Supreme Court's ability to come and affect the government or not. Like that, those are things that are contradicting. You can't say that Israel are peacemakers and at the same time have a government that has a convicted terrorist as its minister of security. Those two. That's like me saying that Iran has a convicted terrorist as.
What is it? What do we even argue? So our anchor right now is if Israel calls itself peaceful or calls itself a democracy. Like
I'm saying it matters because the way that it labels itself.
Are you saying it matters because it's hypocrisy and a contradiction?
Exactly, it's a hypocrisy and contradiction. That the undertone of it removes any context for why the Palestinians are responding to that. Because once you acknowledge that it's not a democracy and that it's authoritative and that it has terroristic supremacist kind of ideals, then you can begin the conversation that, okay, there's a history to that, and that began all the way from the foundation of the world.
Kareem, but why is that the case? Western democracies do horrible things all the time. I mean, look at America's involved in the 60s.
Yeah,
but the United States now acknowledges its genocidal power. It acknowledges that it's committed genocide in indigenous populations. I totally agree with you. If Israel today, Destiny, says that, you know what, we approve of our past, Herzl did say all these kind of colonial statements, we do understand that the world Zionist Zionism in its essence, and political Zionism in its essence, had a genocidal intention. If they knew that it had to lead to the killing of innocent civilians to fulfill its aims, if they talk about that in schools and they change the educational programs in Israel, then I totally am with you. I think it would foster in a new generation of Israelis that would understand a much more balanced.
Which Arab or Turkish or Persian states have acknowledged genocides? Has Turkey acknowledged anything they've done, like to the Armenians? Did Syria acknowledge anything they did to the multitude of people? Did Yemen? What?
Right. But I'm against that. I'm
yeah,
saying
but that's fine. But nobody in this region is acknowledged. Why would Israel?
I think that's wrong. Like I'm not someone who's being a double standard. Who's holding double standards on this issue. I think the fact that Turkey doesn't recognize the Armenian genocide is wrong. I think the fact that Israel does not recognize this past is wrong. I'm saying, and I agree with you. I think what we're coming to is what's the solution. And I love that segue, because my perspective is that everybody needs to be held to the same account. And extremism has to be eliminated. It has to be within Israel that the people impeach or call upon, as they were trying to do actually very recently on the streets, the far-right government that's led by Netanyahu and Ben Gvir, that is literally leading Israel towards chaos, or if you want to speak more objectively, towards at least a step away from democracy. Okay, and they almost have with the judicial reform, right? And so I think the main problem here is extremism. And I think extremism, the people to blame for extremism, we can all hold each other accountable, but also it came from Western intervention in the region, right? Before Western intervention in the region, the Ottoman Empire relatively allowed minorities and people of different religions and faiths. Of course, there were instances of...
Hold on, even where the Ottoman Empire was a conquest empire. What do you mean? It was peaceful after they conquered the whole thing and subjugated everybody to live underneath them?
No, I understand that, but then that goes to everybody, right? That goes to any...
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying even that standard was ridiculous. Like you yourself said that, like, because earlier, earlier you said you got mad at me because we're going to have dhimmi status for the Jews, and you're like, well, even Arabs were second-class citizens. What, compared to what, the Turkish? Yeah, of course, the Arabs and the Turks didn't like each other much. But so yeah, like, so everybody was upset about who ruled the fucking region and who was there. It's not like there was like the period of peace where nobody conquered anybody. So that's, I don't know, it just seems unique to put it on the Israelis here.
Right, but the only problem, I'm not putting it on the Israelis. On the contrary, I'm saying that there's a common issue here, right? That the issue of today's extremism comes from the complete betrayal that the Arabs experienced with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and then all the consequences that led after that, with the fact that the 1920 riots against the mass immigration of Jews being seen as and violating the self-determination of Palestinians who didn't want a Jewish state to be created on their backs. You know what I mean? As anyone would understand, and you even appreciate it if you were living there, you would feel the same way.
Yeah, of course, 100%. But you appreciate that Jews wanted to create a state because they were getting destroyed by Europe. They'd gotten concessions from the British government.
But I think they should have the rights to live in all the greater Israel, right? And I think who I would have condemned at the time, when I say greater Israel, I mean the lands between the Euphrates and the Nile. I believe Jews should have the right to live in Syria. I believe Jews should have the right to live in Iraq. I believe, and they were. And they have communities that date back centuries, and it hurts me as a Levantine, as a Middle Eastern, to see that very deep, rich Jewish culture has been ripped apart from the Arabs, and therefore I condemn the way that the Arabs responded.
Well, hold on, yeah, but there's an empty statement. So you think that Jews should have continued to live as... Oh, I'm curious. Do you think that the Arabs that exist today in Israel have more or less? When I say in Israel, I mean Israel proper. The 2 million Arab Palestinians that exist today in Israel proper. Do you think they have more rights or less rights than the average Jew did living in any of the caliphates?
It's very difficult to make that comparison.
The answer is obviously they did not enjoy the same rights.
I don't think so always, right?
The Jews did not have the same rights.
No, but I mean the Arabs in Israel proper today, according to the 2018 ethnocentric law, are not even regarded by the Constitution to have the same self-determination rights as Jews.
What do you mean? You're talking about immigration policy. Ahmed Tibi is literally one of the most popular. He's an Arab politician that lives in the Knesset. There are Knesset parliament members. There are Arab party members.
There were Jewish politicians in the Ottoman Empire, and there were Jewish politicians in several Islamic caliphates, man. There were Jewish politicians, of course.
Pretty sure there were swaths of time where Jews weren't even allowed to hold to hold any type of office because of the relegation. They also weren't. They also didn't have to fight in the military as a result of that as well.
No, but I see this is all deceiving. Nobody was allowed to fight in the military except Muslims, because there was a Muslim military, and in exchange of paying a jizya, you would be protected and you would get public health and public education. I mean, I think that's super fair. Like if you're not the person. If you're not
the same way that in the United States, yes, slaves were also entitled to some type of education, at least through their job, and some type of healthcare and a place to sleep and food, right? I mean,
yeah, but Jews were also allowed in many instances in the Ottoman Empire to rule themselves with self-sovereignty. They ruled also according to their own law in many instances.
And yes, inside of the land that was allocated to them by the Ottomans or by whoever was ruling the caliphate you're talking about, like.
But I think saying that Jews were being treated the same way the Arabs, like you asked me a question, right? You said who's being treated better, Arabs under Israel proper or Jews under the Islamic Caliphate? I'm saying that depends on what period you take. There were definitely instances where Jews were being treated horribly, which I totally condemn. And again, I want to clarify, this is completely un-Islamic because sometimes it conflates with the religion. And it's like saying the KKK is Christian. It's not. What I'm trying to say is that definitely is something I condemn and something that is completely wrong. The Muslims also, you're not mentioning the other side, right? The Muslims are the ones who returned Jewish presence to Jerusalem when King Herod kicked them out for 500 years. The only reason there was Jews in Jerusalem on the 7th century forward was because of the Islamic Caliph, right?
Once that's in response to it, I'm going to bring it back to a different question.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to.
I mean, when the Jews were in Jerusalem, how much access did they have to the Temple Mount?
It's funny you say that, by the way, because before the Arabs and Muslims brought them back to Jerusalem after King Herod, the Byzantine emperor, kicked them out, the Temple Mount was being used as a garbage site by the Byzantines, and it was the Muslims who cleaned it
and used it for their own religious purposes. There's only been one time in all of history when Muslims and Jews and Christians have been able to visit equal parts, or not equal parts, but different parts of the Temple Mount, and that's when Israel has controlled it, although now like there's a Jordanian proxy.
I'm not sure of that. I need to look into that. I don't know if that's true. That the only time, because that doesn't make sense that the Jews that were living in Jerusalem before 19 for the old Yishuv.
Okay, I want to bring it back to something. This is going to be the last segment of this debate, and this is about America. Is Americans' involvement in this war justified? Specifically under the Biden administration, his policy towards Israel, is it justified morally or not?
I mean, I think they're justified in supporting them. I think that I do think that it's hard without having a lot of penetration into the military. But it seems like there were some actions that were inexcusable by the Israeli military. That WCK bombing was really insane. Some of the I would say some of the issues of getting aid to people, but I don't know if that's been as much of an issue. It's hard to tell because I've been hearing that mass starvation is going to happen for like 12 months now, and for some reason it seems like it hasn't happened at all. So I don't know if aid is doing a good job of getting in or out, but I wish that Israel was a bit more clear about their goals, and I wish that we were given more promises or assurances about what would happen afterwards. Like for instance, I think it's a big deal. They've conducted this war to get rid of all of Hamas from the Gaza Strip. Does that mean we're going to see a lift of the blockade afterwards? Is the Palestinian Authority going to come in and have a right to have it administer that region without Israel doing the taxes back and forth? Are we going to see like easier travel like afterwards? Like I hope that stuff changes. And to be fair, I haven't followed a lot of it closely recently, but I hope that there are strong statements made in Israel about how they're going to administrate in, I guess, concordance with that region afterwards, after the war's over.
Listen, if there's any annexation of land, would you condemn that?
Inside the Gaza Strip?
Yeah.
I would say almost for sure yes. Like the only thing that I'm not sure is if there's like a guard tower or something military related. There might be a world where there might be something maybe, but the any type of like civilian presence or going back to having a settlement, any of that would be absolutely unbelievably, unfathomably horrible and should be condemned rightly by the entire. Like that should be. I think that should actually be a red line for U.S. support for Israel. That if a single civilian home is constructed inside the Gaza Strip, we should 100% pull every bit of support we have from Israel. Like they should have that.
Okay. Let's let Kareem answer.
No, I'd love to. I want to make this into like a conversation. But I just want to ask. So when the houses that are being built in the West Bank, what do you think the Palestinians should do? Because that's also a violation of international law and was regarded as a red line. Or let's say if settlements do happen, let's make it what you were saying. Let's say settlements do start happening in Gaza. I mean, there are groups. I do agree with you that those groups are radical and they've been publishing residential projects to be built on Gaza. I know those guys are not representative of all Israelis, but there are a small group of people who are committed to going and building settlements in Gaza. Like that, there are people that are like that.
Yeah, right? When it comes to the West Bank stuff, like I have ideas, but nobody would support it. Like my stuff would be far more extreme. Like I don't know if I like the two justice system that goes on in the West Bank. I don't think there should be a penalty for killing people that are building outposts. I think if you're a Palestinian or an Israeli and somebody's building outposts and you kill them, I think that should be free kills. You should get to loot their whole body, take all their inventory, and go back to your home. The expansion of the West Bank settlements, I think there needs to be a huge pause on that, and not the tricky pauses, because sometimes Israel will pause settlement expansion when in reality that means that they don't make new settlements, but they just continue to construct buildings even kilometers away and they call it parts of current settlements. I think all of that should be dramatically curbed until some sort of actual solution is reached, because what's happening right now is Israel's just like biding their time and building more and more and more and more and more until they've got so many people there they can't be kicked out. So I think everything that's happening in the West Bank is done to the detriment of the Palestinians there and to a long-term stable Israel, and it's to the detriment of the fucking United States, because it's an election issue that comes up for us and it makes our presidents look bad. So there needs to be way more pressure on Israel to figure their shit out in the West Bank.
Yeah, well, see, that's kind of where we're getting at to the root of the kind of current problem right now. It's like the Palestinians that are living in the West Bank, living in Gaza, and they were originally living in Israel proper before 1948, etc. The Palestinians have continuously and systematically been displaced out of their homes. Their homes are being taken away from them. Many of the innocent civilians are dying. I mean, like you said, if you were a Palestinian, you would understand. You would probably fight back, as you said. But if Israel is not listening to the international community, and Palestinians keep getting their land stolen away from them, it's basically a fight between, will Palestinians submit to Israeli occupation, or will they stand to the death to fight for their life? And I think the latter, based on what we have historically seen, is the reality. And I think that that's what makes it so difficult, because what would you do if you were a Palestinian here right now?
What the Palestinians need to do is the Palestinians need to support a leader. It's probably not going to be Abu Mazen. It's probably going to be somebody else. Have new elections or whatever after. Well, I mean, Hamas is gone, and the biggest reason why the PLO,
gone, by the way.
What?
Only 1,000 members of them have been killed. 20,000, 30,000 members before October 7th existed.
Well, at least all the leadership has been killed, right? Mahmoud Abbas should hold elections again in the PA. Whoever gets elected, and a real election where all the Palestinians are allowed to vote. Whoever wins the vote, hopefully it's done with a decent amount of people, so they can be like a voice for the Palestinian people, can represent them. And then Israel and the Palestinians both need to be forced to come together and make some kind of peace arrangement between the two. Not fucking Oslo 3, not Oslo 4, whatever the fuck, but like an actual, like these, even if it's an interim agreement, at least like this is what the roadmap is to the final settlement between the two of us. Like that has to happen.
What's making that so hard is the Israelis, in their own statements and their own policies, don't want a two-state solution to happen.
Doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter. Right? We're not going to agree on this, and I don't care. But like, because you can throw the quotes, whatever. The reality is the Israeli population doesn't want a lot of things, but when there's an actual agreement on the table, the population's opinion will change. Nobody thought that a peace between Israel and any country could ever be reached. It would never ever happen. And then Sadat calls out. Was it Begin? I think on TV. Oh fuck, I might be mixing it. But like first, I think it was on American media, and then Sadat goes in front of the from the Israeli Knesset to make speeches to Israel about how Egypt and Israel could make peace together, and they do it. And nobody thought that it could happen, and it did. And they made peace, with Egypt, and that was supposed to be impossible, right? Remember, Nasser was like the fucking Hitler of the Middle East, at least in the eyes of the Jewish people, and they managed to make peace with the next leader. So it can happen, but there has to be a leader who's going to say like, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to make it happen. It can happen. You need the leader to do it. Yeah.
I don't disagree that it can happen. What I am saying that what's making this so difficult to happen, we talked about, is that also the Israeli government doesn't want it to happen as well.
Neither do the Palestinians, though. The Palestinians don't want it to happen.
Yeah, but at their perspective, they've had many instances where Israel promised peace and that they've subscribed to those agreements, but none of that has actually materialized.
There's never been an agreement that Israel's made with the Palestinians that both sides have honored completely. That's not true.
I mean, no, they also, of course, you could argue the
Palestinians didn't hold to the Oslo Accords either. There was still constant terrorism that Arafat just wouldn't disavow.
What could they hold exactly? I mean, the entire plan is that basically Israel would control the land, the air.
The deal was supposed to be that Arafat gets people to calm the fuck down on terrorist shit, but Arafat always enjoyed living a double life.
But I mean, he could say the same thing about Israelis for doing that, right?
Well, Israelis were also, but this is the issue, okay? And you're doing this, and all the fucking crazy Zionist people do this, is both of you guys make excuses for why you're actually allowed to fight forever. Well, the reason why Hamas exists is because of this context, and the reason why Arafat and the PLO even exists is because of 60, and the reason why, you can do that all day, but the Jewish people do it as well. They'll say, well, we disengaged from Gaza. What do we get? We got Hamas. We left Lebanon after the first Civil War. What do we, after 2006? What do we get? Hezbollah. We left these places, and what do we get? The biggest bomb makers in the West Bank, and like, everybody can do this all day, but the reality is both sides need to take a leader and step up and do it. And if you want to sit here and say, well, the Palestinians don't want you because of X, then fine, then die. Then all of them will die. They'll get genocided, and that'll be it. And they can be the person at the gates of heaven, like the biker in front of the gates with Peter in front of him, saying, well, I had the right of way in that car, and I can't believe that he cut me off, but he's dead. So if the Palestinians want to continue to make the excuse to the Israeli people that, well, you guys were mean in the Oslo Accords, then fine. Then you're going to lose everything, and you're going to get completely destroyed, and that's it. Or and the Israelis can continue their path, and eventually they're going to fuck up so hard that they're going to kill too many Palestinians, and then all the Arab populations aren't going to be happy with their leaders making agreements anymore, and then Israel is going to get fucking destroyed or whatever. Like, if that's, both sides can make excuses forever in this region. It's going to take somebody saying, I know it's not fair and I know it's not the best, but fuck it, we have to make an agreement and they have to figure it out. And until that happens, nothing's going to,
It's funny you say that, because that's who I'm trying to become, right? It's funny that you say that, and I'm trying as much as possible to say that I totally agree that both sides have to come into terms of the reality of what to do next. I totally agree with that. I totally agree that extremism is the main problem. Both of them don't feel like if they signed an agreement that they would gain their security. That's a problem. And I'd love to, after answering Alex's question, if you're down, is to talk about what the solution would be, because I'd love to share that with you. But the point that I'm making is that yes, there were many instances where Palestinians have not signed agreements, but it wasn't Palestinians who came randomly to fucking France and came and created a colony over there, right? It was a Zionist-backed colony that came into this Palestine, or the mandate, like what later became British Mandate Palestine, or the region of Palestine under the Ottoman Empire, that led to this, right? So colonization is ugly. If it's just called, if it's approved as a colonization, I think it would be like taking a page from Canadian history books. Okay, like what happened to the United States and Canada for Indigenous people is horrible, but we've now reached a point where we understand that and reflect on that. And we
but that point has happened after they conquered the entire land and they have their country.
I mean, yeah, but that's the thing.
Can you address this? So Destiny kind of laid out, fairly hyperbolically, but he laid out what he would do if he was like the U.S. president, like how he would operate. Can you lay out?
Well, answer your question first about like what's basically what should the U.S. do? Basically, right?
That's basically the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Destiny touched upon this as well. That I think personally that the United States is in a tough position, because if the United States continues to inviolably and undeniably support Israel, it's running first into the risk of degrading completely the authority of those international bodies that we talked about. Because if Israel continues to violate those international bodies, and it's you know, the United States keeps vetoing any kind of movement towards holding Israel accountable, then eventually other countries around the world that are much stronger than Hamas and Hezbollah, that have much more incentive to fight the global power order or to take over the control, would really feel emboldened and would feel, okay, well, nobody's respecting international law. I'm going to send my troops to, you know, here and take and annex this land. And I think that's what's slowly happening. If you're watching closely what's happening in Ukraine, you're watching closely on kind of what's happening towards global order. So I think the undeniable support towards Israel risks global order if Israel is not being held accountable, being tamed towards international law. So I think what the United States needs to do, if it is interested in ensuring its own global order, or its position as the police of the world or the world's leading diplomacy, if it wants to keep that throne, it needs to really be adamant on holding Israel accountable as much as possible by putting conditions on aid, by saying, listen, if we're going to send you these weapons, we need proof that they're being used on Hamas specifically. We need some sort of, you know, effort from you guys to also do reparations for or remove settlements from the West Bank, respect the International Court of Justice's ruling, right? So I think the United States needs to push Israel to hold international law, because that's the standard that at least we can all refer to and say as much as possible that mines from all around the world are being involved in producing as much as possible. So I think the United States needs to do everything that it can, from weapons embargoes, from or at least, you know, conditions on aid, conditions on weaponry trade, to really ensure the United States is being held accountable to international law. I think it needs to do everything, and I think personally, it's a matter of national threat to the United States if it doesn't, because the more that the United States allows Israel to violate international law and completely be off the leash, every time it kills, like I mentioned before, only 8,000 Hamas members have been killed out of 30,000 members who were recorded before October 7th. So it's just gonna, and the support for Hamas didn't decrease as a result, right, in the West Bank, in Gaza.
Well,
right?
no, the support for Hamas in Gaza has fallen quite a bit. In the West Bank, it still is relatively stable, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, what does that say? The area where they conducted military operations, people are like, okay, well, fuck, maybe supporting Hamas was not the way to go. In the West Bank, they're like, actually, yeah, keep fighting, good luck. It feels like an analogy for the rest of the world.
But what I'm trying to say is that the radicalization is just going to take a different picture. Like, if you keep bombing, if you keep annexing land and violating international law, think about it in this way, right?
No, I understand what you're saying, but you just only do it one way. How many Israelis were radicalized by the Second Intifada? How many Israelis were now radicalized by October 7th?
Right, but why did the Intifada happen? Right.
The Second Intifada happened. The Second Intifada happened because Arafat didn't think he needed to make peace in Camp David. Why didn't he make peace in Camp David? Maybe he felt like the Jews didn't give him a good deal in the Oslo Accords, but why didn't the Oslo Accords? I mean, we can play this infinitely. This game goes back forever.
Right, but it goes back to one singular point, which is, that's why I always mention.
Wait. What is the one singular point it goes back to?
Herzl's World Zionist Organization.
Why would you stop there? We can say it's in 47-48. We can say it's in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. We can say, which is 15 years after Herzl died. You can say it was Herzl inventing Zionism. Why not when the Jews were originally kicked out of the Kingdom of Israel with Rome? And I mean, you can go back forever. Why would you stop it with Herzl? Why wouldn't you go back to the Caliphites, or why wouldn't you go back to Rome expelling the Israelis?
Because you're talking about a period, right? Like, if you're talking about 1895 and post, you're talking about a period now where there's international bodies that are there to make sure, especially around the League of Nations and the building of the United Nations, to ensure that what used to happen before doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and then the Holocaust happened. So from a Jewish perspective, it seems like they weren't very good at their job, right?
The point Destiny's making is there's blood on both sides, and you can agree with history and fight cause for everything. But I think what he's saying is like, okay, we have to take things as is right now, which is actually something I agree with.
Sure. Are you saying that? are you saying that America should, like, my point here is if Israel is allowed to violate international law just because other people around it are not adhering to international law, then eventually what's going to happen is those international bodies are not going to be respected by other countries in the world, which is literally where we are now. And I think it's only going to get worse. And I am just saying that that's going to literally lead to a global chaos of a World War III type of picture if there's no bodies that are being respected. And I'm saying that it's a matter of national security threat to the United States if it stands with Israel no matter what. At least the United States has to be somewhat I'm not going to say impartial.
Right, let's let Destiny respond to that, because
I just want to end with that last statement. I was just saying the United States needs to do at least stand with international law and say, okay, Israel's wrong for annexing the West Bank. We're not going to give them aid, or we're going to punish them, or we're going to do a tariffs on their products because of that. Right? They don't do that.
Okay, so let's let Destiny respond to that. I just don't want to go like off topic.
Right. Right.
I don't think any response involving the words international law is a serious. I just don't think it's serious. There's nothing's ever going to happen from there. It's nothing. There's nothing.
Wait, hang on. But we're talking about what should happen versus what is.
What should it won't. It won't. I don't care what it should. Nothing is going to involve international law. That's just not how anything has worked. Peace with Egypt didn't happen with international law. A lot of these talks literally were secret tracks. Peace with Jordan didn't happen with international law. The Abraham Accords didn't happen with international law. The recognition of the PLO, Oslo 1 and 2, the Wire Memorandum, none of these happened with international law. Literally, it's just a delusional talking point that people want to use forever when they want to see Israel destroyed as a country. At this point, I think it's an anti-Semitic talking point. The international law is just the invocation of international law has never meant anything to any of the surrounding regions ever. International law didn't kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. It didn't end the Iran-Iraq war. It didn't help at all with Bashar al-Assad's multiple chemical weapon attacks in Syria. It hasn't helped at all in expelling Hezbollah from Lebanon. It didn't help at all with any of the crackdowns during the Arab Spring across all of North Africa, across the entire Middle East. It didn't help. It didn't help the Houthis at all. It didn't help any of the children starving in Yemen. International law is a joke answer. Anybody that says it doesn't care about anything in the region. That's it. It's the most ahistorical, non-factual, non-reality answer ever. I don't know why even say it. There's no point.
Okay, Destiny. I think we can wait. Hang on, Kareem. I think we can all agree that international law has been pretty disappointing throughout history, right? I think we can agree that, and I agree with the point that it's quite often ineffective. But this is a little bit of a separate point. I think what he's getting at is like, well, if you were the president of the United States, like, what are you saying that they should not even try to appeal to?
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. What
are you saying? Like, that appealing to international law is like anti-Semitic somehow? Like, I don't even understand.
Are you asking me? Or sorry?
This is a question for you, Destiny.
It's when people use that talking point, it feels like they're just trying to push the pause button until somebody can come and blow Israel up. Because realistically, it's just nobody is. There's no.
Use it, but it's. I mean, first of all, you were talking about.
Doesn't get that used all the time in regards to Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, it's regarded everywhere.
Well, like, especially when the war began, it was the common talking point was like, yeah, Russia is violating international law.
Yeah, and how's that helped Ukraine?
Yeah, but you're talking about.
Wait. How's that helped Ukraine? Has it helped Ukraine?
We're not talking about help. We're talking about whether it's anti-Semitic or whatever.
I mean, I'm saying that international law, the invocation of international law is meaningless, and everybody knows it. When Ukraine was getting invaded initially, and when you listen to Zelensky talk today, Zelensky isn't saying, all right, guys, when are we going to do the international law thing? Zelensky is saying, I need more planes and I need fucking missiles, because that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day. That's the only thing that mattered when Israel was founded. All the borders were carved in blood. So I'm just saying, when you say, well, we're going to bring in the international law guys and they're going to fix this out. No, they're not. You need to make the Palestinians and you need to make the Israelis understand that until you guys sit down and figure some shit out, your shit is going to be fucked forever. And this like weird invocation of international law just doesn't do anything. It's not helping anybody.
Okay, so okay.
Yeah, Alex, let me just reply. I just want to say, remember Alex's question, right? Alex's question, just to answer you, that's because I saw you got triggered on this. Listen, at the end of the day, his question was, what should the United States president do? The United States president, as a representative of the United States, or arguably the Western world, or the world's leader of diplomacy, if they're not going to abide by international law, or they're not going to at least pretend to uphold it.
The United States has literally told the International Criminal Court that if you arrest one of our people and you bring them to The Hague, we will invade you and take them back. Yeah, so it's not even like a good example of who's going to uphold that order.
But you're proving my point. What you're arguing, you're saying that international law does not translate to the ground as people respecting it, right?
Only when all sides respect it. When everybody's respecting it, then it could be used as a guideline,
right.
Yes.
I'm holding all sides accountable. I'm saying everybody should respect it. I'm not saying only one side should respect it. Now, you're saying, okay, Kareem, you're living in an ideal land. I think that it would be great if everybody respected it, but that's not the reality, and I would agree with you. But the problem here is by completely violating it, you do appreciate that by violating it, it's creating more chaos. because it's creating such a level of double standards and such a level of hypocrisy that people are losing respect towards global order.
I disagree. In the Middle East, following international law would create hypocrisy or double standards. The only thing that has maintained stability in the Middle East has been people playing by strength is voice, or the only thing people respect here is power. That's been the language of that region, Israel and everyone else included, for centuries.
I mean, only if you're talking about after the United States involvement in the Middle East, and you're talking about Western involvement in the Middle East. So the last, 100 years of the Middle East, that's been the case. But it's
what
not
do you
always.
mean? What do you think? When the Ottoman Empire borders expanded and shrank constantly, or when the caliphates were established before that, they were forged through war. Muhammad was a man who did war. This is a war. They're caliphates. They're
a lot of other prophets did war. Saul. A lot of other prophets did war.
Wait. What was that? Wait, what is that a response to?
What do you mean?
Why did you just say a lot of other people did war? Like it was a contradiction to my point, or like I disagree? Obviously, a lot of people did war. You told me that region was peaceful until the United States, like the white man, invented arms and invented warfare. That's not true. The whole region fought and did war.
I never said that the entire region was peaceful. I'm saying that you're talking about this entire region only knows war, only knows power. But you could say that about any other region in the world.
I don't necessarily disagree. It was true in Europe up until like fucking World War II ended. Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that it's not something that is local to the Middle East, because I thought you framed it in a way where it's like only local to the Middle East.
Well, no, because you're trying to frame the Middle East as this exemplary region where if somebody just goes in with the right piece of paper, an international law document, they're going to magically make peace with themselves. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's ever done that.
No, but I never said that. I said that I think peace in the Middle East is possible, but I think that everybody needs to be held accountable to a standard, right? If that third perspective standard, in this case right now, is international law, that's all we have. Now,
yeah, but the problem with this international law standard, here's the problem. Tell me if you disagree with any of this, okay? The problem with the international law standard is the way that Palestinians can cite it is it favors every single thing, basically, that they want that is an impossible agreement that Israel never gives. So, for instance, they'll cite international law and say, oh, you yourself cited the Arab peace resolutions in 2002. They'll say we have a right for every single refugee to return to Israel proper. No,
why does Israel have the right to import every single Jew all around the world to live in Israel?
It's their country and their borders. Yeah,
But what about Palestinians?
They don't have a country right now.
Yeah, but why? Well, they do legally. They do.
No, legally.
No, they're regarded.
If Palestinians wanted to bring in Palestinians to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip or their new country, Israel would be fine with that. But that's not what they want.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah, they would. They would.
No, I don't think they would. No way. How would they annex? Why would they continuously annex the West Bank if they would be okay?
Well, this is assuming they make a deal afterwards where the major chunks.
That violates every intention of Israelis and their perspective of completely obliterating a two-state solution that the international community have accepted.
They want to completely obliterate the two-state solution because every two-state solution that the Palestinians talk about involves an infinite right of return of Arabs to Israel.
Yeah, but that's because also Israelis have portrayed the infinite right of return of every Jew to Israel.
So you think so? Okay, then you agree. So then this deal will never. You should have just said this in the beginning. We don't have to waste time with this. So this deal will never happen. It just won't.
No, the only way it would happen, personally, and this is moving to the next question, is like, what's the road to peace? I think the United Nations Security Council is the only chamber, as weak as international law is. It's probably the only chamber that invites all the permanent members that are involved in this. You have Russia, you have China. You have United States, you have France and Britain. France and Britain has been involved in separating the Middle East and causing this chaos a lot. It's like Pico. Russia and China are just not going to let the United States idly do whatever it wants without taking a piece of the pie and being involved. So I think the UNSC actually provides a good framework for that. And then there's the 10 non-member states. I think those 10 non-member states should be Israel, should be the Palestinian Authority, should be Qatar, should be Turkey, should be Iran, should be Syria, should be Lebanon, Yemen, and all the countries that are involved and that are involved into this situation. And so you fill now the 15 seats into the UNSC. And then I think you begin this discussion about the future of the land, the future of the issue with the right of return of refugees, the future of the issue with radicalism that exists on both sides, the issue of security to Israel. You discuss that and you send peace commissioners on the ground in Jerusalem to ensure and enforce, like you said, with your argument about the United States coming and saying, like, if you guys don't do this, we're going to come militarily. I think by peace commissioners being sent to Jerusalem, making sure that things are being changed on the ground. If Israel does not abide by that, then there'll be military consequences.
Hold on, wait. So you're saying that, but you.
I'm saying that there should be an external organization.
Wait, in a two-state solution, do you think that in a two-state solution?
I'm not talking about a two-state solution.
You're talking about a one-state solution.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
Do you think in a one-state solution, do you think Jews have any reason to believe that they wouldn't be immediately genocided if they became a minority in a country?
I think Palestinians have more reason to believe that as well. I mean,
Wait, hold on. Are they being like exterminated en masse right now?
I mean, if Palestinians wanted to exterminate Jews, they would have exterminated Jews all across the world, wherever they are. There's a lot of Palestinian diaspora.
Wait, hold on. Didn't Jews literally run from every single Arab country in the world except for like a couple in northern Africa where there's like a few thousand left? Wait. What you just said literally exactly happened, right?
This is wrong, right? You're completely removing the reason why Jews were kicked out from the Arab countries. You're completely removing the reason why.
But they were no. You can make excuses for everything, but I'm just saying that what you just said has happened. That literally all the Jews ran from every other Arab state.
Yeah, but why did they run only at that time?
Because after the war in '48, a lot of the Arab states started to view a lot of the what?
Which was fired by what? Which was fueled by what? What fueled the anti-Semitism in the Arab world that pushed the Jews? By the way, not all the Jews.
Whoa, careful! I thought that we always said that we only didn't like the Zionists in Israel. Why would the state of Israel feel anti-Zionism across the entire Arab world?
Oh, that's a very good question. Like they did in Iraq when they bombed synagogues in 1950, 1951 to displace the Jews. I mean, yes, they did that. I mean, and Mossad did that and was involved in bombing synagogues to displace the Jews.
So Mossad being involved in those attacks in Baghdad is not 100% true. That's not 100% known. You can talk about things like the Levant affair in Egypt that was more 100% like pinned on Israel, sure. But there was anti-Semitism that was springing up across the Arab world. There's a reason why all these Jews left all these countries and left all their shit behind. It wasn't just because of memes.
No, but wait, Destiny. They left at that time. The reason, if there was I'm not saying there was never anti-Semitism in the Middle East. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that the rise of anti-Semitism at that time is a consequence of the fact that the West was completely supporting the Zionist kind of movement and allowing this.
That, first of all, that's not true. The West was not completely supporting the Zionist movement.
What are you talking about?
What? In 48, the Jews had no support. What do you mean? They'd been fighting with the British from 40 to 44. They literally bombed the King David Hotel. Like they hated them.
Yeah, I know that, but the Balfour Declaration, ever since 1999, the British were supporting...
The Balfour Declaration was basically torn up and abandoned by 1939.
No, but it's what opened the door for the mass immigration of Jews.
That's fine, but timelines are important. You're telling me that Jews were kicked out of the Arab world as a result of the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was gone by 39. Jews started to get kicked out in 47 and 48.
Right, but they were kicked out because of the fact that there was a push towards creating an independent Jewish state.
Correct.
That violated the self-determination and self-sovereignty of Palestinians. There was a state being created on top of people that already lived there for thousands of years.
Sure, and so the rest of the Arab states started to pogrom the Jews, and a lot of them left. They were like, fuck this, yeah.
No, I'm not condoning the fact that they did that. I'm not supporting that they should do that. I'm condemning that they did that. But I'm not naive to understand why that happened.
I know, and I don't think you are. And I even agree. I understand it, man. Fuck them. Listen, I got a bunch of Jewish people in my life that I don't fucking like sometimes, okay? But I'm just saying that it can't be this, it can't be this infinite excuse for why the Arabs did what they did, and then all of a sudden no understanding for why they did. You keep doing this. You agree with me every time I say Israel fucked up this, and I agree with the Arabs here. But then anytime I say the Arabs fucked up here and Israel, was right to do this, you're like, well, but the Arabs had a really good reason. It's like this with every single super pro-Palestinian, every single super pro-Zionist.
But the reason why you do that is because, the reason why I'm doing that here is because you're not mentioning the context of why it happened, right? I'm saying.
What context do you think I've missed?
No, I mean, in this case, right, when you're talking about displacement of Jews from Arab countries, you completely did not mention why that happened. You did not mention that there was also fear. Like, take the example of Eli Cohen, right? A man who was a Mossad agent that infiltrated the Syrian government and almost was the second or third hand next to the president. There was fear that there was a lot of the Jews in those countries were being weaponized by Israel in terms of intelligence. It doesn't validate.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, these things did happen. And there were also pull factors in Israel as well, where Israel was willing to accommodate a bunch of people, was asking a bunch of people to come here too, sure. But I'm just saying that doesn't change the fact that there are no Jews that live in Arab countries, really. It just doesn't happen. There are 2 million Arabs that live in Israel.
But there were Jews that were living in Arab countries.
As second-class citizens, there were, yes.
No, I wouldn't argue that they were, like, when you say they were living as second-class citizens, you need to understand there were scholars, there were poets, they were involved heavily in the community. They lived, like, in my city in Syria.
What?
Like,
That's just not a response to anything. There were famous slaves in the United States of America. What does that have to do with anything? Like,
no, but it's a very different picture when you say that they were living as second-class citizens. A person who has no idea of how it's like could think like, oh, Jews were being just treated like Christians are being treated today in Jerusalem, where settlers come and spit on them and desecrate their graves. That's not a Christian that is living right now in Israel it's not having the same standard that a Jew was living in Islam at some times. Of course, there were moments.
Wait, do you think a Christian living in Israel today is like getting hardcore fucked up, or?
I mean, in Jerusalem, they're being spat on, they're being desecrated. In Bethlehem, they're not even allowed to do mass sometimes. They're fucking IDF
They're being
stuff.
spat on and desecrated? That's our examples of like horrible living
Yeah,
standard?
but why is it that every time that I give you an example of how other people are being treated horribly there, you completely sideline it?
Because
But then-
your example of being treated horribly is that some people are spitting on them, and for dhimmi status, you weren't allowed to participate in the military. You had an extra tax. You weren't allowed to ride horses. You were relegated to certain areas to live. Like, it was a totally different standard.
Horses are pretty awesome, to be fair.
No, but first of all, this idea of dhimmi status, the first thing you need to understand is that the agreement of dhimmi status is the idea that you being a non-Muslim, right? You're not going to be part of the army, right? So in exchange, we protect you. It wasn't the dhimmi status doesn't say that you get to not ride horses and live in certain areas.
That was part of it, but hold on, you that's a cute
No,
way
you're talking about certain times.
to say that dhimmi status is protected is like saying that the U.S. military protected U.S. slaves. Of course, the dhimmi status, they were protected because their territory had been conquered by Muslims that were in charge of owning that territory.
But the relationship between the United States white people and slaves is a completely different relationship between Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
Sure, it was worse, yeah, but dhimmi was still a second-class citizen status.
I mean, we could argue that depends on the nuances.
Sure,
that
we can
talking
do. We can.
about.
I'm just saying that there are Arabs that
but-
live in Israel right now that seem to do pretty well in Israel proper.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think they're very happy of the way that it's not like they don't believe that Israel's an occupation as well. I mean, there's
Sure, they might not believe it's occupation. Sure, that's fine, but
I'm saying they do believe it is. I'm not saying they don't.
or I'm saying they might have issues with it. It might not be like a perfect scenario, but
Listen, I want to go back to
Yeah.
what to do, right? What to do? What's the path to peace? Easily, very quickly. I just want to say there should be an external body that holds the hands of the East and the West, all the bodies that are going to be involved with this, because one of the
Who do you
fears-
think that body should be? Let's just do specifics.
The
he
reason
said,
why
he
they-
said the UN Security Council. He said.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is because it's already established. It's the most realistic body that could really convene a meeting tomorrow. You know what I mean? Now, I don't think that means peace can be tomorrow. I really think the path to peace has to come within Israel. I think the only way that has to happen is there has to be a period of time where the Israeli people need to come and make their voices heard and impeach the current government. They need to elect a Mizrahi prime minister, I think, a person who speaks Arabic preferably. A Mizrahi means Middle Eastern Jew, right? Who has kind of ties towards the cultures of the people in the neighboring countries and is able, which never happened, by the way. There's never been a non-Ashkenazi Jewish prime minister, which is also interesting, but that's a different story. But I think they need to elect a much more moderate government, and they need to represent a Mizrahi Jewish prime minister, and that person needs to do some reforms in terms of accepting Israel's past. It needs to be an open knowledge, and they need to accept and swallow the fact that they've committed the Nakba. And then all of that has to be transparent and put into the educational system the same way that Israelis, they learn about Hamas and the trust.
I don't even know what. Hold on. First of all, just because you're a Mizrahi Jew or of Mizrahi descent doesn't mean that you speak Arab. Pretty sure most of these people abandon the Arab language. Number one. Number two, aren't Mizrahis unlikely? They're going to be more likely to be right wing versus Ashkenazi that are going to be more like if you go out and you walk to fucking Bet Salem or whatever, you're probably going to find a bunch of fucking. I'm sorry, you're going to find a bunch of Ashkenazi Jews. No.
No, I never said that if you're a Mizrahi Jew, that means you speak Arabic. I said that it would be preferable if
Why don't you respond to his bigger point, though? Like the bigger point he's making about ignore the part about the prime minister and ignore the part about like education, acknowledging past sins. Like just the larger point about the UN Security Council should be the one that's.
Let me say it very clearly. UNSC. Right. Let me start very clearly. The Israeli people need to make their voices heard within Israel, which is already happening. People are taken to the street protesting what's happening. Right. You need to impeach the far-right government that has a convicted terrorist as its minister of security. You need to impeach the government that has a prime minister where an arrest warrant from the ICJ is ongoing for him. Let's ignore that. Sure. The Israeli people need to make their voices heard. They need to impeach that government. They need to elect a much more.
The majority of Israelis, they're in favor of this war.
No, that's fine. Okay, so what do the Palestinians have to do?
Wait, let me finish, right? So they need to elect a moderate government in Israel, right? That's going to allow for communication channels on both sides. You need to elect a much more liberal government that, first of all, acknowledges. If you don't acknowledge the Nakba and acknowledge the past of Israel, the Palestinians are never going to feel that their label as the indigenous people who were living there, at least for the past, if you want to say only the 7th century, but that's total bullshit because the Palestinians are not Arab, they're Arabis.
Okay, how can the UN Security Council force the Palestinians?
No.
I want to know what do the Palestinians have to do?
So listen, guys, two plans.
He's answering.
Yes, two plans, short term, long term. The short term plan I was telling you has to come within Israel. They need to elect a new liberal government that allows communication channels between both sides, that holds into justice the far right government, and looks in the eyes of Palestinians and Israelis as though far-right members are being held to the law, right? Once that happens, there needs to be educational reform, policy reform. That's
no, you said that, but what about for the Palestinian side?
right. Now that you've acknowledged the Nakba and acknowledged Israel's history and background, you now have to have a Palestinian representative, as Destiny was saying. The Palestinians have to elect or allow them to represent them. That has to be in communication. So either the Israelis need to include Palestinian members in the Knesset, where they can make their voices heard.
No. What do the Palestinians have to do? Not Israelis include them in Knesset, because also, by the way, Arabs can already be in the Knesset, so I don't know why we say that.
Arab Israelis.
Yes, you have to generally be a citizen of a country to join their parliament. Yes, but what does the Palestinians have to do for peace on their side?
Well, the only thing that they can do right now, right, is they're being shot at, they're being killed. The only thing that they
let's assume there's a ceasefire right now, right? Like what do Palestinians need to do?
What can they do? What tools do they have?
That's the problem.
What should they do? Like, what do you think in ideal world? We're talking about ideal worlds here.
But that's the thing. What can they? Because knowing practically the things on the ground, what can they do? What tools?
One of the things you said is they need to elect a moderate government, right? They need to kick out.
But Palestinians can't do that. Like, are you saying that? Oh, you're talking ideally? Of course, Palestinians should elect a much more, understanding kind of leader that is willing to have a peaceful communication with Israel.
So, how can the UN Security Council force the Palestinians to do that? That's my question. What should the UN Security Council do to make this happen? You're right now. I wave a magic wand. You're in charge of the UN Security Council. Right. What can the UN Security Council do to guarantee or to make ultimately maybe
economic incentives and military punishments? That's the only answer. The only answer is if they follow the path to peace, where they discuss, land acknowledgements, they discuss reparations, discuss the future of the Israeli/Palestinian state. Then, if they follow those laws, they get economic incentives on both sides that are being, that incentivize them to walk that path. If they don't do that, kind of what Destiny touched upon, there has to be military consequences and economic consequences.
Wait, but hasn't this exact plan basically happened where Israel was like, okay, wow, the Palestinians are going to have an election and it's going to be great, and then they elected Hamas in 2005. It's like, okay, well.
But they also, bro, when they disengaged from Gaza in 2005, they completely blockaded Gaza as well.
The blockade didn't come, the total blockade didn't come after Hamas.
Hang on, I don't want to go back to that. I want Destiny to respond to what Kareem said. What do you think about his UN Security Council plan? Like just what he said there.
Well, let me sorry, Destiny. Let me just conclude it, right? What am I trying to get to? What's the end goal of this, right? What I'm trying to say is an external organization that, like the UNSC, has the military means to be on ground and ensure that there is some sort of peace path that is being held. Once that happens, I believe we need to unite with our Levantine identity. I really believe that. I personally think whenever I speak to Mizrahi Jews and Middle Eastern Jews, there's still this love towards Levantine. Levantine means Syrian, Jordanian, Palestinian, Lebanese, like that area. There's a big love towards that Levantine identity, the music, the culture that we all share. And I think the only way that we can get out of this conflict is we all subscribe as Levantines. So I was talking to a person about this, an IDF soldier, actually, through the Adam Sauce podcast that we were on. This idea of having like a united Levantine emirate, where Jewish cities have complete self-sovereignty and self-control, similar to the United Arab Emirates, which was composed of tribes that were killing each other, right? So it's not like it's impossible. I believe that the only way that there would be true peace is you have some sort of Levantine emirate where the Jews have self-sovereignty over cities that they're a majority in, the Christians have self-sovereignty over cities.
All right, let's let Destiny respond to all that.
I just wanted to finish that united Levantine emirate, but that happens after, right? I'm not saying that can happen now because then you don't have the guarantee that people.
I want Destiny specifically to respond to the UN Security Council plan.
Yeah. I mean, there were UN peacekeeping forces in the Sinai from 56 to 67, and then they all got kicked out when Nasser thought that it was time to posture for war. I mean, there were UN. Were there UN peacekeeping forces north of the what's the name of that stupid fucking river in northern Israel, the Levantine or whatever? I don't remember if there were UN peacekeeping forces there or if the UN said that you guys need to not do anything. In Ukraine, obviously, in Ukraine, obviously the UN says you need to stop doing war here. It's not good. Like, if you were a Jew, why would you have any confidence whatsoever that the UN is going to be able to enforce any type of nonviolent action here, especially when you keep alluding to the United Nations Security Council? You only need one veto from a Security Council permanent member to not have anything happen ever. And you've got obviously different opinions here. So like Russia, China, the US are all going to agree on what Like this is never, none of this is ever. This is just not realistic. It's not
All
going
right,
to happen.
Destiny. So propose a better alternative than his UN Security Council.
I gave an alternative, but just people won't do it. But a realistic solution would be somebody like the United States going in and saying like, hey, listen, here's a giant fucking cache of weapons. Okay, you guys need to come together and make a fucking agreement. You got 24 months, and if you guys can't reach an agreement, whichever one is willing to give the most, you get all the weapons, and you can go blow the fuck up out of the other side. You've got a 1-year moratorium on all the war crimes, all the killing, whatever the fuck you want to do, and then after war, whatever territory you've got, you got it. Boom, and you're done.
Kareem, what's your response to
My response to that is that would also stand like that would first of all kill all the Palestinians and Jews. It would cause a lot of murder there, which I don't want. Also,
wait, why the Palestinians wouldn't be able to give more than the Israelis on a negotiation?
I don't understand what you mean by give more.
As in, you guys need to come together and make if you're a Palestinian, you're saying, "Oh, I agree." If you're a Palestinian, you say, "I agree with peace as long as every single Palestinian can go back to Israel." You're not real. It's never going to happen. If you're an Israeli and you think that, I agree with peace, but like you're not going to get any of we're going to keep all of our settlements, even the deep settlements. You're never going to have any independent security apparatus. You're never going to be able to travel across borders. The blockade in Gaza. Then that's also not a serious agreement, right? There has to be.
So you're saying that if that happens, if the Israelis did not want to remove their settlements, the United States should give the Palestinians weapons. That's what you're saying.
Arm the fuck out of them and blow all the Israelis up. If they can't make any real serious concessions when it comes to like making a peace agreement, then yeah. And it doesn't have to be removal of the. It could be like land swaps or whatever else, so that the integrity of the land is
That would also kill innocent Jews in the process.
I'm fine with that. If they can't make an agreement, that's fine. Innocent Jews already died on October 7th. Innocent Jews died in 2014, 2008, 2005, the whole Second Intifada. Like. Yeah.
Right. But I don't want that to happen because I do believe.
Okay. Let me rework what Destiny's saying just slightly to kind of go around your moral quandary. Okay. How about this? U.S. gets Israel and Palestinians together. They say you have a year to figure this out. If the side that gives the most concessions is going to be our ally moving forward, no weapons involved. The side that is unwilling to make concessions will be our enemy. Like, let's just rework it like that.
Yeah, but I think now we're getting to the world of too much idealism. Like, it's never going to happen.
To be clear, this is exactly how peace was settled in the past. That's how it worked that's how it worked when the U.S. went in to resolve the Bosnian situation. It's how it worked when Carter was talking to Israel. Like, there was a lot of pressure from external parties. You have to fucking make peace, and we'll help you if you do make peace. If Egypt made peace, the U.S. was ready to step up and fund them like crazy, and they do, and we do to this day. Like, there has to be external pressure that's making people want to come together.
We bribed Egypt massively. We gave them billions of dollars for peace.
No, I agree. There needs to be external pressure.
Wait, did you say millions? It's billions. We paid Egypt lots of money.
Yeah, no, I do agree that there needs to be external pressure. But when I said the UNSC, I wasn't talking about it as a regulatory. I was talking about the member states that are part of the permanent member states. I think it will only be enforced if they have military consequences, as in like Russia, China, France, Britain, and the United States will all be on boots on ground.
But what does military consequences mean? What does that mean?
That means like if it's exactly what you're saying, but other than only giving it to one side, it's that the external body's acting.
He's not saying giving it to one side. He's saying giving it to
saying if Palestinians don't concede, like he's saying basically the saying between Palestinians and Israelis, whoever doesn't give up the most land is going to take the weapons, and then they can fuck over the other person. That's kind of the plan. I get that. I get the perspective. But I'm saying my plan is that there should be an external body like the UN Security Council that comes in and says, okay, listen, Israel, if you're not going to remove your settlements by these next 2 years, or listen, Palestine, if you're not going to elect a liberal government that's going to make peace with Israel, we're going to be on the ground and we're going to ensure it fucking happens. You know what I mean?
Kareem, so you're saying you're okay with what instead of America, it's the UN Security Council, right?
Sorry.
So you're on board with what Destiny said about the incentives and disincentives, but instead of the U.S., you believe it should be the member states.
Yeah, no, he's talking about creating a one-state solution.
Because I don't think that it's possible. I don't think it would be ever possible.
But when you say external body, they're going to be like the police in the one state forever? Like,
no, there has to be, like I said, there has to be an interim government that is like the UNSC has to kind of oversight, and then there has to be some sort of movement towards some sort of emirate-like structure. Because the only problem with this destiny is like you said, the Israelis never want a two-state solution. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. Both sides are in conflict. The only way that there will be peace is that there has to be a third identity that everybody.
That Emirati solution is going to end up massively favoring Jewish dominance. Like the Emirati solution is because the splitting of families and everything is going to happen way more on the Arab side than the Jewish side. I don't think Jews give a fuck much about like the family shit at all. I don't think they see themselves as like a unified Israeli like people. Like they're Zionists. They literally go to Israel to be like Arabs don't, and Palestinians don't have that same cohesive identity as like, oh, we're all Arabs and all Palestinians or whatever. I think it's way more divided in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
When I say Emirati, Emirates, it's because Emirates, I'm not referring to the country. Emirati means like it's a political system.
Yeah,
Emirati,
so you're talking about a differentiation of political systems along different ethnic or nationalistic lines or whatever.
Right,
But that's not going to work because the Jews aren't going to divide themselves in what I'm Northern Jews and Southern Jews, right? It's not like Druze or Bedouins or different families in the West
Just a
Bank.
heads up, in 3-4 minutes, I want to get into closing statements.
No problem. No, I'm talking about if you're like a Jewish dominant city, you should have the right to rule as a Jewish dominant city. You have self-sovereignty as a Jew. This is a Jewish law. It's kind of like in Emirates, like in Sharjah, you have completely different law than in Dubai, right? It's completely different law, but it's under this united blanket that's called the United Arab Emirates. And there's a political structure where there's a president that's elected and there's a council of tribe members. So that there'll be a council that will be the leader of each emirate, right? That's the only way that I see it happening, because the only way that you would appease the radicals in Israel, because they view the Greater Israel Project as a path to now we're talking more religious stuff, but they view that Greater Israel as a messianic promise, and a lot of the members of the Knesset or the far right government are subscribed to that ideology, right? You have Smutrich talking on a podium with a logo of Israel. I mean,
Nobody wants to. This would suck. I don't think the Arabs would ever agree to this. Why would you want to do like, oh, we're gonna have city states so we get fucking Khan Yunis and Gaza City? Meanwhile, you guys get like fucking Tel Aviv and the majority of Jerusalem, and like
there's freedom of movement. There's freedom of trade, right?
Wait. Why would there be freedom of movement if each of the city states get to decide how they want to do their own shit?
No, you're talking about like the whole idea of having a united Levantine Emirates is that you have one country, so to speak, one united blanket that has individual city states that control their people. So let's say, for example, Tel Aviv, if you have a very religious Jewish city that wants to pass laws by the Torah, they can do that. If you have Tel Aviv that wants to be a Jewish dominant city, but they want to be more liberal, they can do that. And then Bethlehem can be a Christian dominant city and they want to like do Christian sovereignty, they can do that. And I think that should open up the entire Levant. And I'll tell you why, Stephen, because Israelis have the right to live in Israel between the Nile and the Euphrates. That's their right to live there. What they don't have the right to do is create a state and kill innocent people to achieve that.
Sure, I guess, but your issue is you run into two huge issues. So one is Jerusalem is still a problem that you'd have to sort out because now there are so many fucking Jews there. Because
Jerusalem would be the only country that would be kind of
so Jerusalem is kind of fucked. And then the second big problem, you're going to run into is how are cities going to expand? Because you're still asking Palestinians to give up their right of return, because Palestinians are going to still say like, well, look at Tel Aviv. I had family that came from Jaffa. I had family that came from like these poor. I had family like they're still going to lose their right of return to these cities. So you're still asking Palestinians to make like a huge sacrifice that they've never been willing to make. Like,
no, they can live. They can like remember that it's both. Israelis can live anywhere in the Levant, and Palestinians can live anywhere in the Levant.
Yeah, but Palestinians don't want to live anywhere in the Levant. They want to go back to their homes. That's the whole point of the right of return, right?
Right. So you're saying that they're all going to be concentrated in cities that are going to be Jewish-led cities.
Yeah, that's the big issue with the right of return is Palestinians want to go back to those cities, right?
But if Palestinians want to live under Jewish rule, consciously or with consent.
Yeah, but it's not going to be Jewish rule because it's going to be a majority Arabs. That's the whole reason why Jews don't like the idea of all of them coming back.
Yeah, but remember that we said that happened after the entire whole United Nations Security Council on the peace initiatives and peace committee. That's why I'm saying this plan.
I'll give you guys one more response.
Yeah, sure. He can answer. It's fine. I'm good. Yeah.
No. But I'm saying like what you're saying makes sense. But I'm putting this whole United Levantine Emirates as a solution that would happen downstream. You know, like all the movements that would lead to it would definitely, you would need to change the culture. You'd need to change the educational program. There needs to be a United Levantine identity, right? Like, for example, now we're getting too much into like ethnicities and genetics and whatever, but we're all kind of the sons of Jacob. Like Palestinians are not Arabs, they're Arabized, right? Their DNA is 80% compatible with ancient Bronze Age.
Yeah, but that's fine, but nobody that lives there right now thinks that. Nobody cares about that. That's not like a...
So that's what I'm saying, but that a lot of people didn't care about a lot of things that they care about now. I think there needs to be a cultural shift. There needs to be a movement of pushing people towards subscribing towards the Levantine identity. And so I'm saying way before that, sorry, Alex, one second. Way before that, step number one, if you're asking me what step number one is, step number one is a ceasefire. Step number two is the Israelis have to impeach the far-right government so that the Palestinians feel like these guys are violating international law, they're convicted terrorists, they need to be held accountable. Then Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian kind of representative have to have an individual that is willing to have communication with an Israeli representative, a much more moderate Israeli leader, and then you can open the channel for a sort of peace that would lead to sort of the discussion of land acknowledgements, reparations, possibly acknowledging the Nakba, possibly acknowledging what happened in the origins of Zionism and the kind of Herzlian like colonial perspectives of that. And once that it gets embedded into the educational program, now you can imagine a new generation of Israelis and Palestinians that have that view of, okay, we understand what happened, because Zionists are living in a bubble, and very radical Palestinians, both sides that are extremely polarized, are living in a bubble. So without having that movement towards that, peace will not be achieved. I think
But that has to also apply to Palestinians, right?
Of course, I think there needs to be a Palestinian Authority representative or leader, whatever. The only problem with the Palestinians, they have
like with education and acknowledging.
Of course, yes, 100%. I think there should be no books in Palestine should say that just should be eradicated. 100%. That's bullshit. That's against Islam. Again, and remember, I'm not saying that it's what Muslims have done. Cultural representation and scriptural representation, two completely different things. But like, I'm saying that it should be wrong, and there's something that you can fall back on to say that it's wrong. The fact that they're doing it has there's no fucking consensus to it other than wanting to kill entire other people in response to an occupation, right? So I
do gotta go to closing statements because I
enjoyed this, man. It was fun.
So listen. So here's I want to do a little thought experiment for the closing statement. So start off your closing statement by steel manning what the other person has been saying during the debate. Just a quick steel man what the other person was saying, and then you can give your final take on the debate, the topic that we've discussed. Let's try to keep it under 2 or 3 minutes.
What's steel manning?
Steel manning means is where you basically say, okay, this is what this other person was. You make a best case argument for what that other person was saying.
Be in their shoes, kind of like.
It's the opposite of straw manning.
I can start if that's okay, Destiny.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Destiny made a kind of is coming from the perspective of reality of kind of what the situation is like now, and I think that he was coming from the perspective of, okay, I understand that the history happened and whatever happened, there's kind of valid reasons for why we're here, but the reality is this is where we're at and we need to kind of do something about it. I think he got I don't know if the word's pragmatic or idealist or I'm trying to say it in the positive life. Like, I think that you were coming at it more from a low-hanging fruit perspective of like, what can we actually do on the ground? And I think he was actually, I don't think he is necessarily one-sided or per se. I think that he understands the perspective of Palestinians from the lens of, okay, like if I was in their shoes, I would see myself possibly doing the same thing. And he also came from the lens of understanding the lens of also the Israelis. So I think that he did a great job of at least like touching both points and making kind of extending an olive branch, so to speak, between both camps. And I think he was very kind of like pragmatic of the perspective of, okay, like what can we actually do now? You know what I mean? So I think that was really, really good.
Okay, let's let Destiny do the same exercise and just sum up your position.
What? I'm sorry. What do you? I'm supposed to stay on the other side and then.
No, just steel man what Dr. Kareem was saying the whole time, and then just summarize your position, like or your thoughts.
That the Palestinians have been terrorized for a long time, and so they have to fight back. But hopefully, Israel can give a whole bunch, and then the UN will make everything good.
But is that your honest steel man though?
That's the steelman argument for the other side is that after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, there were some written promises, or they felt like there were promises made to the Arabs that inhabited the region, that if they helped the British in any way, size, shape, or form, that they would be able to have a state of their own, okay, when the Turks were gone and the Ottoman Empire collapsed. And after the war, 1917, Jews in Europe, these white invaders, got a promise from the British government to come and basically settle on all of our fucking land. So if you're a Palestinian, you've inhabited a land for hundreds of years, or sometimes even longer, depending on what it is, and now all of these weird white people are showing up, they're buying shit from you, and by you, I mean they're buying shit from wealthy landowners that have never even lived there before, and now you're all getting kicked out. And as time goes on, you're getting ass pained over this. You try to fight back against some of them because you see them coming in and take your land, and then the British shows up, and the British basically completely and totally fucking annihilates you from 36 to 39 during the Arab revolts. Afterwards, you see the Jews start to fight against the Brits because the Brits are trying to tell the Jews, hey, you guys can't keep coming in so much, you're fucking it all up. And then the Jews decide to start terror attacking and killing the Brits, and then the Arabs are like, okay, well, fuck us, I guess the Jews are here to fuck us over. So the Palestinians lived in the region, it felt like, for a long time. The Jews are basically there there to just fight and expand and fight and expand. They say that they're for peace, but then they keep bombing you everywhere. They keep attacking you everywhere. In 67, they eat up literally all of the rest of the land that you had. They continue to make more with the people around them. And then slowly you find yourself being abandoned on every side by people that you thought were allies. You thought Egypt was your ally, but then they sold out to the United States. You thought Jordan was your ally. They even gave citizenship to some of your people. And then they sell out to this new coalition of countries that are starting to make peace with Israel. And eventually you find yourself with only terrorists as your allies, an unwilling Israel that doesn't ever want to negotiate with you. And so your situation becomes increasingly desperate. So all you have left to do is resort to terrorism until somebody internationally comes and basically shores up your position. I guess where the Palestinians are right now.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. Anyway, fun debate, guys. Why don't you guys just quickly mention where people can find you? Kareem, you want to go first? Where can people find you?
Absolutely. First of all, really enjoyed the debate. Alex, big up for organizing. Destiny, it was a pleasure to meet you. Enjoyed that conversation so much. Yeah, you guys can follow me at Dr. Kareem Atassi, exactly how my title is seen right now in the box. I just want to say that I do, talking about this, I do believe that Muslims, Jews, and Christians all have the right, the Levantine Muslim Christians and Jews have the right to live in those lands. And I would hope for a day where we would all centralize or come together as Levantines and hold into that identity that we all share in common, that we all love, And so that's kind of my message. And if you vibe with that, follow me on Instagram or go to levantines.com and join our program.
All right, Destiny.
This sucks. I don't know what to say, but if you're a Westerner, just fuck off and don't ever talk about this issue because it's too complicated and there's too much shit to realize what the fuck is going on. I would say be very careful. I don't know if Kareem does this intentionally or not, but a lot of what Kareem says are basically dog whistles for things that would lead to the absolute destruction of the Israeli people. And in the West, we don't identify or recognize these things as much, but a Jewish person that lives in Israel absolutely hears it. So when you hear statements like, I just want everybody to live together peacefully, to the West, that sounds nice. To an Israeli Jew, they're saying, oh, you want all of the Arabs to come back here. You want to make us an ethnic minority in our area, and then you want to dissolve our state so that there's one Arab majority state from river to sea, like every single other state in the region, which is going to lead to our subjugation.
Is that what you really think Kareem is saying?
No, I'm not saying that he's saying it, but every single Jew in Israel is going to hear it. When you say, I want you all to live together peacefully, that's always a dog whistle for a one state where the Jews become a minority, which is why Kareem also never said that he would give up the right of return for Arabs to go back to Israel. Although he did say he wanted an emirate solution, whatever that would look like, it would still be.
But I'm also okay with Jews living wherever they want in the Middle East as well.
Jews don't. Jews don't want to live anywhere else in the Middle East because they can't.
Oh, I don't really agree with that. I think they, especially if they're religious, I think they want to live farther than just the Judea and Samaria. I think they have much wider claims to lands across the Nile to the Euphrates. They've been living there for thousands of years. I mean, they've been living in Damascus for way longer than they've ever lived in Israel. So just to be clear, bro, I don't believe that we should completely.
There are no Jews that want to go and live up in Damascus right now. I promise you that.
Man. I don't know if you've asked every Jew.
Let's keep the Jews in America. We need them to.
But I'm just saying that, like, I'm not saying I want to be clear. I'm not saying I don't know Kareem well enough. I don't know if he's like. I'm not saying that he's like doing these evil things. He's trying. I don't know. I just know that there are a lot of people that use these arguments, and every time a Jew from Israel hears it, they're like, "Huh, I know what's going on here, bro. That's some fucked up shit." Just like whenever you hear a Jew say West Bank, what's that? You mean Judea and Samaria? They're also on some fucked up shit. So fuck this whole region. Fuck the people there. Give them 24 months to negotiate shit. Leave a giant box with nuclear weapons in it and put a time code on it, and whoever's willing to give the most in a peace agreement, if they can agree on peace, then support them both, and if they can't, then give more weapons to the other side and let them blow the other side up, and we can all move on with our lives. That's what I think.
Yeah, all right. Good. That's a good closing point. All right, guys. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Thank you guys for appearing. This was a good.
Thank you, Alex, for all your
early.
Thanks a lot.
See you guys later.
Bye. Fucking Israel, Palestine. Oh my God. Hold on, I make sure they're okay downstairs. I think Loner Box and Pixie, yeah. I think I can turn on my stream downstairs for my remote desktop, right? Wait, why is there no volume? Oh, wait, hold on. Do I have my mics turned off? What do I need to do to hear through my remote desktop? can I hear this? Hold on. Oh. I don't see the volume going up and down. I don't know why. Oof. I wonder if there's like, I wonder if something is happening. Or I wonder if maybe it's just not active because on remote desktop, maybe it hasn't like turned the device on or something. Because you have to like log into Windows first on the main account. Maybe? I have no idea. Like I wonder if I start this stream, I wonder if it'll even start. Let me check. Hold on. Split? Yeah, my stream will split when I change my shit. How do you deal with him rephrasing what you said in a shitty light? I would have not. It's just fucking. I don't care, bro. I'm fucking bored. Israel Palestine is fucking AIDS. It's like abortion, but for foreign politics. Okay, modify. Tools, profile, boom, boom, boom. Okay. Don't forget that the Ashkenazi / non-Ashkenazi distinction, dog whistle for sending the Europeans back to Europe. Yeah, kind of true. Okay, I'm going to turn the stream off and we're going to pray to God that my stream starts downstairs. Okay, good luck, brave warriors.